Hey, Lauren. So we're a few minutes past 6. Scott, did you want to wait a couple of minutes, or you want to go ahead and get started?
Let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, we got a really great group. I kind of was wondering with the sunshine and how nice it is outside, how many people would show up. So thank you so much for being here and taking time out of this lovely evening to be with us here and to move forward. We've got even though it doesn't look like it on this agenda, it looks kind of small. We actually have a lot of ground to cover tonight. So we'll try to be as timely as possible and to move the agenda forward as we look to really kind of wrap a bow around the middle school. The site, really the site was kind of the big thing that we wanted to look at there. And we've got some refinement we want to share with you tonight and kind of look at that, get some comments and some feedback. Once we're done with the middle school, then we'll jump onto all the other sites for all the other K-5 and K-8 sites for some thoughts and some considerations for what we could do with those sites, and just wanted to hear feedback from this group on whether or not that's the right approach, and how we could refine that approach in preparation for our next meeting, so that we can really kind of wrap a bow around that. You'll notice that Silverton High School is not on here at the moment, and that's just because of the sheer volume of inventory that we're going to be looking at tonight. So we really couldn't fit it into the agenda and be timely. So we'll bring that at the next meeting and look at Silverton High School as we're wrapping up at the K-5, K-8 sites. Then we'll again go around the room and see what we learned today and thoughts and feedback. But before we get into all of that, we thought it was really helpful last time to kind of start the dialogue and start the meeting with an open discussion round, and just kind of, go around the room and see if there's anything that we wanted to talk about at this meeting, had thought about since the last meeting. And if not, feel free to just say, pass. I'd like to just talk in the end. Don't feel like obligated to speak at this moment. But it's always good to hear that feedback. So we'll do very similar to last time, I think, 20 minutes, and just kind of go around the room, and I'll just call on everybody in the order that I see them on the screen, and we'll start from there. So let's see here. Aaron, did you have anything you wanted to share or thoughts since our last meeting?
Yeah, I just was grateful for seeing some of the concepts kind of come to life, just again on a high level for our middle school last time. It was really great to kind of get into some of those tangible discussions about what it could be and what it could look like, and where could we put it, and where is it best going to serve our students and our community. So I just really appreciate the engaged discussion on that. And then I'm just looking forward this week just to see for the other schools how some of those plans look, and again, some of the most pressing needs, and what do we really need to do to make sure we're maximizing improvement at each one of those facilities. So looking forward to tonight.
Thanks, Aaron. Brett, do you have anything you want to share?
I would echo the exact same thing. It was really exciting looking at the middle school last time and making some changes on that, but I'm looking forward to just taking a look at every other school.
Great. Thank you, Brett. Melissa, do you have anything you want to share?
Yeah, of course, the middle school look at that was great. I have been thinking a little bit since the last meeting, and I've had some discussions, and I really think it might be a good time before we get too far ahead of ourselves to maybe survey the community and see how the community feels about sort of where we are right now with the bond, with middle school and then some money for all the other schools. And if that's what the community wants, or if the community wants something different. So I've heard some different ideas.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. Brett Milton, is there anything you wanted to share?
Excuse me, I'd echo the same thing. I'm looking forward to seeing, the results of for the other schools, and especially from a technology standpoint. And I know you threw out some acronyms last time, like GPON and whatnot. So I'd love to chat with you in the future specifically about these cool new technologies that maybe if we do get an actual new middle school that we can implement. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great. Appreciate that. Josh, anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating to read the old bond proposals from '98 and 2012. I really wish we would have started with that a whole lot earlier, because they put in a lot of work trying to solve the same problems that we're encountering right now. And just kind of reading those minutes and how those discussions went. I guess I have a bit of a concern, we really haven't come up with anything long-term. Like what's the long-term plan for some of these buildings? And I'm still really concerned about space issues. And I hope maybe when we talk about some of these other buildings today that we can talk about maybe labs for science or computer or robotics, and how maybe we can get that discussed. But no matter what, I know it's been a crazy year. And whether we pass a bond or not, I really hope that the work that we do here will just almost be just copied for the next time, because it's such good work that the school board can, hey, that was an awesome plan. Let's see if we can get this done when things are not so crazy. So those are my concerns.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Eliza.
I think I'll pass for right now. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Eliza. Ray.
Sorry, I was late. Update on Windows 10, and boy, the computer took forever to get going. Anyway, just a thought, and it's Brett and Josh both kind of hinted at this. When I was teaching at the high school, and I don't remember when, but maybe early 2000, 15 years or so ago, we bought a new science textbook. And I said, my guess is this is the last one we'll buy. The next science textbook will be on that. At that point in time, I said it will be on a CD. Well, I think I called it wrong. I think they've bought some additional textbooks since then. But thinking about that, and I don't remember how much space may have been put in the proposal for a library, I think we really need to get some input from media specialists and Brett and so on to look carefully at the amount of space that's in the library and how it's to be configured, because technology is coming, and I think that's a really important issue. It's hard to predict, but we need to do the best we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray. Aaron Scott.
Oh, sorry, we've got two of us in the same room. There we go. As exciting as the middle school is, and I, with all of my heart, hope that we can get something passed someday. I'm also a little concerned, kind of the same that Josh had. I'm not hearing a whole lot of like, what's the 5-year plan? What's the 10-year plan? As far as if this is a long-term facility plan, where's the plan? So that's, aside from the middle school, what is the plan for all of these buildings for the next, 5, 10, 15 years or so?
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Lisa.
I would echo everybody else. I think we came off a really good meeting, and I hope, it'll be good to see what we have in store for us this evening. So yeah, I'm curious what you have going for the country schools.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. Peter.
Yeah, just don't want to keep echoing, but just to start off with, the concern is still the long-term and long-range plan. So that's something that I just don't quite, I don't see past really the bond, and that's concerning because I think we need to be planning for the bond cycle, or at least the majority of it. But on that, I'm really excited to see what the discussion is about the rural schools and the schools in town, and the thoughts on what to include in that bond. So I'm curious and excited to see that.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Tom.
Yeah, I would like to second what Melissa and some of the others were saying, that I think looking at the long range plan is good, and to really survey the community about what their concerns are. I think including the, this middle school is obviously a crying need, but I think trying to break it up into multiple bonds over the next 10 years is likely to cause a challenge for moving forward. And I think we'll go way farther ahead if we do a cogent plan that would include some of the other crying needs in the district.
Gotcha. Thanks, Tom. Let's see here, James. James, I'll come back to you. Alan.
Yeah, I think we had a great discussion the last time, and I like how the group all works together and isn't afraid to say what is on their mind out there. So I just want to see how we're going to do tonight and just keep moving forward. And I echo what they say. The bond measure thing really scares me because back to our first meeting, I want to say you said it was like 60 or 70% of our voters are over the age of 60. So pushing bond measures, I think, is going to be tough.
Thanks, Alan. April.
I'll pass for now. I think everything that I was going to say has been said by other people.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, April. Wally.
Yeah, I'll pass for now as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, other than echoing Ray's comments about Windows 10, sometimes mine takes a little while to load too.
Thanks, Jason. Colin.
I guess I would kind of echo, not to do it again to everybody, but that this, if we are going to do a bond that tries to tackle something for all the schools, that I'm interested to hear from Lauren and some of the other specialists, I guess, that what is it going to take to get those schools set up to last for a 30-year bond? Because that's my biggest concern is we do this now, that's all we're going to have for 20 to 30 years. And is that going to be enough to get all of these buildings and everything through that amount of time?
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Colin. Let's see, Lori.
Yes, that would be me, I believe, unless there's another Lori. Yeah, I just wanted to share that as I sit back and listen to the committee speak, I just want to let all of you know that I hope that you get all the information you need, all the documents you need, because it's my understanding, Jonah, and you can correct me, that this group will be coming to the board in May and presenting us with information. And so my hope is that there is enough information out there for everyone to provide a well-balanced consensus as they present to the board. And that's my hope. And it sounds like you're doing a great job facilitating And I look forward to the outcome, but May's not that far away. Unless am I correct on that, Jonah, or have I misspoken?
You would be correct. That was the time frame that we were looking to do that, Lori. And I think it'll be important for us to kind of round robin with the district and just look at the schedule and make sure that that's the time that we want to do that. So that's when we had planned it for sure.
Okay,
Yep, so
well, I
you're
thank
right.
you.
You're right. It's coming up quick.
It is coming up very quickly. So thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
You bet.
And then James, I believe we skipped you earlier.
Yeah, hi Jonah. Sorry, I had another call come in that I ran to. So, but I have no comments. I'm just enjoying listening in. So.
Great, thank you, James. And then did I miss anybody besides Lauren, Steve, Scott, and Dan?
I know I have comments that I'll make in a little bit, but thanks, Jonah.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I appreciate all of the feedback, everybody, and the discussion points. And I'm hoping that we can address some of those items tonight, and then obviously at our next meeting as we move forward. To Lori's point, we want to have a cohesive plan and vision as we look to present to the school board and really wrap a bow around the long-range facility plan, and making sure that we're set up well for this not just this next bond cycle, but laying the foundation for the work that happened thereafter. I think one thing I do want to remind everybody of is this long-range facility plan really is a living document. It is foundational to work moving forward. So I just want to, I want people to, to really kind of hear that and understand that, and things change over time, and they'll modify. Administrators will move on, school boards, will change, community will change, the dynamic will change over time. So laying the foundation for that change is a very pertinent thing to do and a good thing to do. So I appreciate everybody's feedback there. I just wanted to revisit the agenda for the upcoming meetings. So we have 2 meetings left in our long-range facility planning. And at our next meeting, it's pretty similar to what we saw last time. There may be a little bit of refinement to it as we move along, but really talking about the enhancements to the K-5, K-8 sites. So the information that we'll look at tonight, I'm hoping to get a lot of really good feedback on what we're presenting so that we can come back to you next time with some refinements to those sites and enhancements to them. And then look at Silverton High School and what do we want to include for Silverton High School? I know the last 2 successful bond measures had a phase 1, phase 2 for Silverton High School. So we'll want to be thoughtful about that as we move forward and what makes the most sense to do there. So we will come next time with some thoughts there. And then we'll actually, what you don't see on this agenda, but I believe we'll have is, some updated information for some bond scenarios. So looking at different bond values and how those would impact the community, in the pocketbook and just kind of in longevity and what that might look like. I think that with that information, we may want to look at some prioritization of bond budget scenarios, and what that will entail is looking comprehensively at everything that we've discussed thus far and have come to consensus on, and see what that dollar value looks like, and really start prioritizing that more. And that's kind of where we'll start seeing some more of those long range planning needs come into play. And knowing that what we're looking at together will likely exceed at first blush that dollar amount, but we'll just want to look at that as a group and kind of come to a consensus there. that dovetails into that prioritization of overall needs. And then again, what did we learn? At the meeting after that, what we're proposing is really reviewing a very high level draft long range facility plan with this group that we will intend to present to the school board. And that will be that kind of draft plan, again, really high level. The document that we'll produce at the end of the day will be pretty voluminous. So we're not going to go through every word and kind of go through the plan, but we'll want to present it at a high level and provide that for consumption to this group. And then, talk about any kind of potential refinements to that, and then really kick it off and wrap up our work there. So that's the plan moving forward for the next couple of meetings after this meeting. So we'll see how well that goes and kind of adjust as needed. But right now I'd like to kick it over to Scott to say a few words.
Thanks, Jonah, and welcome everyone. It's so good for me to listen to everybody's comments at the beginning. It really helps because I've definitely noticed common themes each time we meet. And one of the ones that comes up the most is the concern over what is the plan past 10 years, into the future and things of that nature. And I just wanted to touch on that for a minute to sort of reiterate what Jonah said about this plan being a living, breathing document. And I just want you to know that even after our work is done this year, that in no way means that the plan is completely finished. We will come back to revisiting that. And this has been a huge learning opportunity for me this year, and I'll rely on you going forward when we try to implement next steps. So I just wanted to mention that my commitment to support this process even after, whether that's in the form of a superintendent's work group or in another venue. But I just wanted to make sure that I clearly articulated that to everybody, that I'm hearing that loud and clear from all of you. And the extent to which our bond is successful will come down to the support that you give to our school district. So it's a really, really important thing to keep in mind. I am looking forward to tonight. Steve and I met with Jonah and Richard yesterday and kind of went over the presentation, and I think you'll find it really engaging. Last meeting, it was really noticeable to me how engaged everybody became once we started seeing the scenarios in graphics and sort of some mock-ups. And you'll see that in our other schools, not just the middle school tonight. But I also asked Dan Bush to attend this meeting, our assistant superintendent, because Dan has a lot of expertise around public meeting laws and sort of friendly things to keep in mind, friendly reminders. And although this is overdue, I've also heard loud and clear from committee members that it would be nice to have a refresher or a brief presentation on things to keep in mind regarding the times we live in with email and social media and that sort of thing. And Dan is here to talk to you a little bit about that. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I really appreciate those of you who are willing to come in and take time out of your day to meet with me. I continue to reach out to individual members, and I'll continue to do so. I've just thoroughly enjoyed the last several conversations in particular, and I just wanted to thank you for that. I know it's time out of your day, but for me, it's time well spent, and I really appreciate your thoughts and your feedback. Having said that, I'll pass it back to you, Jonah. I know Dan's on deck, and yeah, we can get this started.
Yeah,
great.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. And nice to have everybody speak first so I could know a little bit of who the audience was, and several I've gotten a chance to meet in my year and a half or so in the district, and others definitely have recognized some names. And so when Scott asked me to put this together, there's actually a companion document that I don't know if made it onto Board Book, or that we had Lisa Freely, who is an attorney that we work with on occasion. She's an employee or an attorney with the WESD. And so I actually went to Lisa to have her put together some background. So there's about a 2-page, if not 2.5-page document that is in more detail about public meeting laws for those of you who like to geek out on some of this stuff. I do. And so, but I thought I just put together a couple slides here to give an overview. And then if you want to dig deeper, we will get that document that Lisa put together for you so you can go into that. And so I'm not going to read this verbatim. That's not what a good PowerPoint does. This just kind of gives you an overview of some key things here that this committee is subject to public meeting laws. And it talks a little bit about, when the governing body is here. And it doesn't matter whether they're here virtually or here in the same room or here on an email, which is I'm going to talk about in a second. And so the two most important aspects of the public meeting law is notice, which is the question, did we tell people we're meeting? People need to know that we're meeting. And then location or access, they're sort of the same, but I like to use them together like this, like location or access, which is where are we meeting and can others attend that meeting? Go ahead to the next slide there. And so just to really address why emails become problematic is because they rarely notify the public that they're happening. They happen, and the public's not aware that an email amongst a public a group of people that are subject to public meeting laws is happening. So one of the reasons why emails can be problematic is we fail to notify the public. And then oftentimes the public's excluded because they're not part of the email chain. And so some ways around this is if you want information, here's what I suggest to people that, maybe like if a board member wanted something, having a board member, instead of a board member asking the entire board for some information, ask that to Scott or to me, the people that can provide you that information. Because what oftentimes happens is somebody asks a question, hey, I want this document from such and such a time, and that spurs a conversation. Or somebody wants to know, why do you want that information? And so then that spurs a conversation. And so one way to just be careful is if you need information, that's what Scott and our staff are here to help you with. And so feel free to ask us for that information. And I think 9 times out of 10, the reason why emails happen is they're just so convenient. And sometimes we want to get the thought process going. We don't want to wait to the meeting to get the conversation started. But here's the thing to think about. If you want to propose something for other members of the committee to consider, you have to remember that the public deserves that same opportunity. The public deserves the opportunity to be thinking about the same things that you might be proposing. So these meetings are accessible to the public. And so if you bring up an idea, the public needs to at least have access by the notice and the access to that meeting. So just a few things, if that makes sense. Anytime there's an advocacy for a position, the public needs to know, where did that advocacy come from? Because I heard Jonah talk earlier about reaching consensus. That's the key. The public needs to know how that consensus was reached. So when there's advocacy coming in from different places, before you reach consensus, the public has to have access to that. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that explains a little bit of the why for that. I did see a few questions popping into the chat that I didn't quite. So Josh asked the question, are we allowed to have an executive session as a committee group? I'm not a total expert on that, but I would highly doubt it. Their executive session is a very tight window of things that can be happening in executive session. So I doubt that one. I think Peter asked a great question. I think if we had an official list, so people know who's talking to each other, that would be great. So
I have a question because I think there's still some clarity or some questions on the information request. Because like I put in one that I thought I was doing the right thing by emailing just Scott, Jonah, Steve, and maybe one other, and Richard, I believe. But it was hesitant to give information because they felt that that was not under the right, rules of the meeting law. So I was basically just asking questions for like enrollment numbers and populations and some of that. And so then a few of us were talking. So if we need, if we actually can't ask for information in front of the whole group, could we possibly have a meeting every 2 weeks of just the committee without Jonah and Richard, just to check in and say, hey, does anybody have any questions or new information they want or something? Because we wait a whole month, meeting to meeting. And if there's something in between, we have, we can't get anything unless we request it right now. It might take another month to get the results. Does that make sense?
I understand. I haven't been part of the meeting, Colin, but I understand what you're asking for. I would have to defer to Scott or someone on that.
Because I think the last time we had said that any request anybody wants needed to be made like tonight on the video. Is that what you're thinking, Scott, or can we at least?
Well, I think the main thing is that everybody needs to be included on the communication. And then the issue was that chains were going around and not everybody was included. And so that becomes problematic because some people are getting information and others aren't. So again, we can get you any information that you need. This is a perfect setting to do that. We've also done our best to try to post most of that on the website. We've done that, since the last meeting, all the requests that we've gotten. So if you need us to post any other additional info, you're more than welcome to contact me for that, or Debbie, and we can certainly help with that. The key issue is that everybody's included on the conversation, and it's why email can be so problematic.
I'm confused. I'm hearing if we talk to everybody on the committee via email, that's a quorum, and the public is not able to participate, so that is not acceptable. Yet if we trim it down so it's only 4 people, which is not a quorum, that's not acceptable.
So Colin, maybe go back and tell me, specifically, what might have been asked for, and maybe I can help walk through, maybe a better way.
Well, I at one point had emailed Steve and Scott and Jonah and Richard and said, hey, can you get more information on past enrollment from like the last couple years? And Steve said, yeah, I'll work on it. We'll have it by February 15th. Then there was a lot of the exchange back and forth. And then at one meeting, they were saying, don't email, every question has to come out of committee. So then we didn't ask any more questions. Then the email was going around, and the email actually included people that weren't even committee members going back and forth. And so things just got really convoluted and confusing. And I think that's kind of where Tom's coming from is so, and I was also asked somebody else, like, can I myself do a public records request or a request for information to either you or Steve or Scott individually, since I'm on the committee? Or do I have to include everybody and say, hey, everybody, I'm asking for this information?
Well, I think there's 2 different things there. I think that one is you're as far as public records laws go, I mean, you being on this committee, if you wanted information for your own purposes, it would just be subject to public meeting laws, which could have fees attached to it. If it is, and again, this is my first meeting with you guys, but if it's more like you're wanting information that you think the group could benefit from, then I think that's a discussion for the group to have together, which what I heard you suggesting is maybe just the committee meet every other week, so you're not waiting in between so long. So that what you would do in this kind of setting, you would say, hey, I want to look at historical data, and if the group consensus is, yeah, we should be looking at that, then the group would say, we need to get that data. And then Scott or Steve would do that. So that's how that should happen. And I understand what you're saying about then maybe the frequency should increase because it takes too long in between.
Hey, Dan, let me throw something out there too. And this is, from past service on boards before and having to go through training on public meeting laws. And maybe this is going to help clarify some things. And I always like to try to keep things simple because we have a lot of things to think about. Is that asking a question and throwing something out there via email to the committee is one thing. Where I've always understood it to go awry is when you start getting conversations on that topic bouncing around from different individuals. That's where that danger zone occurs. It's one thing to ask a question. It's one thing to ask, hey, can we get more information on this? That's gone out, and the people that are on the committee or Jonah or whoever, or Dan or yourself or Scott see that and acknowledge that. The danger zone is when you start getting conversations going off that strain. That's where the danger zone occurs. And is that making it too simple? Or
no, I think that's pretty accurate. And also just really the advocacy piece around, taking a position on something is definitely line crossing in the public meeting laws. I think that as far as asking for information, I think that I tend to, because I'm in HR, I take everything as like, let's be safe and so sometimes that's a little too restrictive maybe. So that's maybe the viewpoint I'm bringing is about just avoiding email altogether. But I do think maybe coming up with some systems or some norms about how do we, hey, I'm volunteering my time here. I want to have the information so I'm empowered to come and bring in and be helpful. Then what's the process by which we can make these requests for the information to empower us for these meetings?
So is there a prohibition on having a request from anybody to the district for having something posted on the long range website? Because I feel like that would just be public information.
Yeah, Yeah, I think, Tom, I think that would be, if we think it's beneficial for the whole group to have it, like say I'm thinking about a document that you requested several weeks ago that we got up. The long range facilities plan from the late 90s, for example, that someone in the group, I can't remember exactly who, but thought that might be helpful. So we got that posted on our website for everybody.
Right, but is it reasonable just to be able to contact the office and say, hey, well,
yes,
post this? So we don't need to wait until the meeting to do that. We can just
don't have to. I mean, if it's something really straightforward, not really. The reason why we wanted to do it at the last meeting was because a lot of requests were coming in and not everybody was getting the communication. There seemed to be some confusion. And so we just wanted to get it all done during the meeting when everybody was there. But I don't see a major issue if it's something we feel the whole group can benefit from, as long as it's within reason and Debbie can get to it. We did our best to get everybody's requests met the last time, and we'll continue to do that. We've really updated that web page quite a bit since the last meeting.
Well,
I think that last part is really, really critical what Scott said there, as far as, the time that it takes, because, when I get public records requests occasionally, if I know where that document's at, I know where it resides, I can get that back to that person in 30 minutes or less, then, it's quick and done. I want to serve people. If it's something that I have to go retrieve, then there is board policy around charging. So I do think it depends on the scope of what's being asked there.
Of course.
So, yeah. Lori, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I interrupted someone.
Oh, no. It's fine. I just wanted to know, I'm sort of getting I just want the clarity for the group that if they wish to see information, they can request it here in the meeting, because this is a public meeting. I hope I have that correct. Or they can make a formal request through email. And then if it was, what if somebody said, to Colin's point, I'd like the whole group to know this. then would he be responded to and say, we'll get back to you tomorrow on why or why not we can't post this on the website, or make sure that everybody has entire access? Is that my understanding? That it goes through a little bit of a filtering process, I would imagine, before posting?
Yeah,
the public?
just like Dan said, spur a conversation. I'd have to take each scenario in context, of course, but yeah, I mean, I can't give you an exact answer because it depends on what the request is. But if it's something that the entire group can benefit from and it's just information sharing, I don't think that's a problem at all.
So it's
Really
it's
want
not
to make sure that
necessary.
everybody's getting the information.
Yes, and so it's not necessary to do a straw poll, say during the meeting. It can simply be handled in that manner,
Yes.
either orally or through email. Thank you.
Yeah. What we wouldn't want to have happen is one committee member's requesting all the information and it's only being sent to that community member. We want to make sure that this information is available to everybody. And what became problematic is that not everybody is being included on the email strings and everything else. So we just want to make sure that the committee's informed of all of these requests and that they have access to it, which they would through our website.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask a quick question? Hi, this is Eliza. I just wanted to know if we need to make a public meetings or records request for the minutes from these meetings that we're having, or copies of the slides that are presented during the presentations. Or how do we get access to meeting minutes and slide from the presentation?
Those should be posted on the website, Eliza, on the district's website.
Okay. I see the meeting videos posted there, but I'll double check. Maybe I'm
I'll
just
write that
missing
down.
something.
I'll
Thank
check,
you.
Eliza. If it's not there, we'll follow up on that.
Great. Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that clarity.
I'll let you guys get on to your great work.
Great.
I do enjoy, and I do see some of the emails. I do, you know, even though I haven't been a part of your guys' meetings, and I'll leave that to Scott and Steve and Lauren, but I do, it's exciting to see the progress, and I can't wait to see the board presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Just the piggyback on that, you know, just looking at the norms again for our long-range facility planning committee work. Again, just being respectful of others' ideas, opinions, and questions. Be engaged and please actively participate throughout the meeting. Understand that there's no bad ideas, that we're really here to listen to everybody, but trying to facilitate consensus as well. Meetings should start on time. Understood that there's challenges at times to make the meetings, but if you can make it on time, we don't have an issue with that at all. After this and during the long-range facility planning process, really become ambassadors for the work and what we're doing, and become ambassadors for the bond when that does come out. I think that is really helpful to get that word of mouth from somebody that was on it. Along with those no bad ideas, just being open-minded and thinking outside the box is always a good thing. And then we'll again look at consensus decision making in the next slide. But be a good listener, and you know, we probably should keep this one at the very top, but keep the needs of the students first, because that's really who we're designing for and who we're planning for ultimately. Again, we're an advisory group. The final decisions will be made at the school board level. But, you know, if we have a good plan in place when we go to the school board, I don't foresee any challenges there. And of course, always have fun. That consensus decision-making is always about honoring the input of each member. It's about working together as a committee, so everyone on the committee understands how those decisions were made and why. I think Dan really in talking about kind of some email chains and just people not being necessarily connected, and having that consensus done at these meetings leaves nothing to question, because it's taped and there's minutes. So it really, you can track how that consensus was made. For all those, we've been keeping that running list of parking lot for ideas, and those are captured in our minutes. And if we can't come to an agreement, we've done a version of this at our last 2 meetings where we had a poll, and that was really just a majority poll. But if there was something that was an impasse, then an actionable item would come to a vote. The 75% needed to break that deadlock there. Again, long-range facility guiding principles done at the meeting number 2, protect our community's investments in all of the Sylvan Falls School District schools, provide a safe and high-quality learning environment for all students in all buildings, to spend our tax dollars as wisely as possible. So being thoughtful about how those are spent, and how those would help the project and help the district moving forward. So I think with that, let's jump into the middle school and just kind of talk about some of the refinements that we were looking at since our last meeting. I thought we had a really good, engaging meeting, and a clear consensus on the direction that we wanted to head at the middle school, kind of from a planning perspective, high level perspective, to start really looking at dollars and cents once we kind of finalize a plan. Again, this is just a reminder of the overall site and what's existing there now. And we really wanted to look at how to phase the project in at the middle school. We came to consensus on this option A, which was really phasing it in place of the Schlater campus itself. A lot of the conversation last time revolved around really site development for the most part. There was a few floor plan adjustments, but not a whole lot. The biggest one being the proximity of the new auxiliary gym to the existing gymnasium, and moving that from where it was previously located over here up to the north there. I think that was a really, really good refinement, and it makes a lot of sense just to consolidate that house and keep the active community together. For the most part, everything else stayed pretty much the same from a planning perspective, with admin and student services up front. I think we heard a general consensus that we really like that frontage on Schlater Street and that prominence there, and wanted to keep that as the front door. Commons over to the east here with food service here, and then of course all that back of house stuff, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and receiving. Media center is actually up on the 2nd floor, but special needs is down on the 1st. And then as you move up, we repeat that grade level grouping. So down on the bottom could be a 6th grade level community. This could be 7th and 8th grade level community, overlooking Schlater Street and James Street there. And that's really, and then the media center, of course, up there on the 2nd floor as well. So those are really the big refinements at the floor plan level from a adjacency standpoint. Some of the really great feedback that we heard last time had to do with not just that PE and the Ox Gym location, but wanting to increase the stall count for event parking for the game, and the fact that we're going to lose a lot of parking, albeit challenging in the center of the campus. It is a loss, so we wanted to look at that and how could we increase that parking and go back. So just doing a really quick parking count and some opportunities for increasing parking. We looked at this potential for 262 stalls on this site, and that kind of shows you what that looks like for that stall count there. This is really a net increase of 262 262 stalls, or I'm sorry, it's a total of 262 stalls. We ended up losing 30 stalls when we placed a maintenance building over here. So if we factored that into consideration, we really had about 155 total by my count over here, kind of between the portables and you know, circuitously going over here. Over on the James Street side, we had less stalls over here. We didn't have the stalls up here in the north parking lot. So we end up getting, with this proposal, this plan, and you guys tell me if this is the right approach or not, a net increase of about 107 stalls on that campus. And we had targeted about 100, wanting to increase that stall count by. Some other improvements related to that is that we can look at opportunities for different drop-off zones as well. So we could widen this out to be a 32-foot wide thoroughfare and have more of a bus drop-off zone here in the back. So buses could queue up right here and drop right off into the gym and to the Ox gym, but also park here for games. And then kind of come around here and peel out. I think this north parking lot was a really good enhancement and refinement that was suggested last time. And after reviewing kind of the access and opportunities for access, this really made the most sense coming straight off of Florida over here, and right off that opportunity. What it does is it keeps all of this intact up here. And so, you know, we're thinking that probably makes some sense there. The other really good suggestion, I think it was Colin that started the conversation last time, was taking that old maintenance building and repurposing that for, you know, the separation of middle school, high school athletics, and, you know, locker rooms and things like that. And after meeting with Brett and James Rise and talking about those two programs, one, you know, we all agreed that was a really good idea, separating that. But two, thought that maybe a better location might be over here, kind of right next to the stadium, allowing for kind of a maximum allowable area for playable fields, you know, just for recess and kind of just your daily use here, but really kind of creating more of a zone over here was the thought behind that. The other drop-off opportunity that we could look at, and we showed a little bit of this last time, kind of had a smaller, if you remember, smaller parking lot over here, is increasing this over here, so that you could, you know, in lieu of dropping off along Schlater, you could either augment that and increase your queuing by, you know, backing up in here and around, or you could use that itself, or this could, you know, serve as a bus drop off. I think the idea is creating that flexibility. So, you know, even if I'm in band, and I'm needing, you know, instrument pickup or drop off, you know, I can come over here and drop off really easily. You know, so just kind of creating that versatility, we think is a good refinement to be had there. And then of course, all the fun. Okay.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Why are we not including all the parking off of Brown Street in front of the district office? There's a ton of parking spots there too. Are we planning on keeping those?
In the stall count, Josh?
Yeah.
We're not suggesting doing anything to any of that. So basically that parking just stays as is. So it's really, when I say an increase in parking, I'm kind of talking about the four corners of this site, really. So not looking at off-site. So this would be an increase to that as well.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Josh?
Yeah, I just there's that massive parking lot there, the old parking lot in front of the district office, and I mean there's still tons of space there.
There is, and what I've and what I've heard is even with that, it's still a challenge at best for event nights, and that we'd like for opportunities. Now, what I will say is it's a lot easier to decrease parking than it is to increase parking. So if we think that the 262 stalls here on this site is too much, it's easy enough to decrease that parking. This is really kind of showing the opportunities for that there. So those are kind of some of the big refinements on the site. The other thing we talked about, and we just have a note here, was the opportunity to resurface this covered tennis court and having that really as a good community function, and then potentially covering it as well for a rainy day as well there. So that's something that we could take a look at from a budgeting standpoint and see if that makes some sense. But I think with that, those are kind of the big refinements. I mean, does that seem to capture what we talked about? What do you guys think?
I have a quick question on the 100 stalls next to the building right there. Does that work to have ADA parking in there for like the football field, or would it have to be over by the restrooms?
You could have ADA parking here potentially, and then finding a route over here. And that's something that we'd have to dig into. You would also have ADA parking here. So that ADA parking would really be distributed throughout, I think. Obviously we'd want ADA parking over here. We'd want it over here, probably over here. And then probably over here is kind of where we have to have a certain amount, a certain percent per parking stalls for ADA, and we just would want to distribute those as much as possible.
Basically in each lot, you have to have a certain percentage in each lot.
In the overall, and then they have to be close to an entrance, basically. So they have to be, truly accessible for people with ambulatory challenges. So with that, you will lose, a stall here or there as you create that island to come across. Similarly, we'll probably have some more planning requirements that we'll have to look at a little bit closer. Full disclosure, I still have to meet with the city on some of those items. So I know I talked to Jason last time and said that we meet between last time in this meeting, but we haven't had an opportunity to do that. So that's on me. But anyways, does that answer your question, Colin?
Comment, please. The maintenance building, I don't know what's in that building, but district equipment, vehicles, and so on, quite a bit of traffic. Probably it might make more sense to relocate that down adjacent to Brown Street, which would be down right on the edge of your picture. And then that would free up possibly some more parking close to the district office. The other little point is you can see those green trees, a little bit of vegetation there on the how do I describe it? Next to the railroad tracks on the south side of the football field, right next to the track. That is a memorial area for excuse me, for students who have died while attending the high school. And so you might consider some kind of little different access to that region.
Is that where's that at, Ray? I apologize for not having that on here. Where is that located at? Is that kind of here?
It would be, if you see the word Foxes on the football field, just extend over to the right, towards the top, the right-hand corner, just outside the track, that green vegetation, no, down the other end.
Okay, yeah.
Go the other way. Go to the right, around the track,
Right.
keep going, go across the track, now down. Okay, that green vegetation right in there.
Oh, right here.
There are several, yes, several memorials to students who have died.
Gotcha.
And so, excuse me, if the maintenance building were moved, then that would allow some kind of different access to that region.
Gotcha.
I have a question about student movement with the courtyard in the middle. I know the kids are walking outside a lot now. Is that going to require them to cut across there in the future, which of course, as we all know in Oregon, is usually less than ideal for good chunks of the school year?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Not necessarily. You know, it can be set up where there's doors out. I mean, there will be doors out to the courtyard, you know, through here, and then also in the commons probably, but it would not require you to go through there. So if you go kind of on the first floor, there'll actually be hallways through these grade level communities here and here. So we'll have access basically inside all around for that.
Okay, and then, oh, sorry.
I was just going to add, Jonah, right there at the courtyard there, one of the last phases was to make a connecting hallway such that you can go from the special education over to commons. So there may be, we're going to leave a gap, maybe, or strategically you want to leave a gap so you can get maintenance equipment in there, but there is a short, it'd be a covered walkway, but they still have the option to make all those movements internally.
Okay. The other question I had was, it looks like the community area is 3 levels. Is that right?
It's 2.
It's 2.
It's
okay.
Yeah.
Is everything else 2 or is everything else 1? I'm sorry. I guess I can't read architectural drawings.
No, that's a great question, Kristen. It's 2 stories here for the grade level communities and the media center. And then everything else is basically 1 story. Now, I mean, there could be opportunities to look at condensing this a little bit, you know, like as an example, this related arts and CTE could come up here and join the media center and be a 2-story space as well. And then just having a, you know, an entrance into the gym there. So that could be an opportunity to increase kind of our 2-story space there.
Another comment, it would seem to me that most of the students spend most of the time in the grade level community. And so I guess my question is, would it make more sense to have that in closer to the center of the site? In other words, surround the grade level community with gym on one side and then the media center, commons and so on the other side. That's just a thought.
That's a good thought there, Ray.
Did I come through?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Any other thoughts or comments or feedback or anything we missed from our comments?
The area where it says existing locker rooms, that would still be 2-story, correct? That would include the mezzanine?
Yes, that would. Yep.
And
You're correct there,
Brett, do you envision, or do you guys envision like doors from that going into the hallways of the media center, or is that kind of just, or like a stairway? Is this like a stairway that would go down?
It would, if we could make that connection, it probably would make some sense.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And then the only other question I had is, are we making the auxiliary gym smaller for a reason of square footage and cost, or why not make it the same size footprint as the existing gym?
But really both those reasons, Colin, cost, square footage, trying to minimize the impact, to be honest. You know, since we have a full-size gym already, that's pretty standard for especially a smaller middle school.
Do we know what the difference is roughly? I mean, have you?
You mean as far as square footage?
Well, if we did it the same footprint, like how much difference in money are we talking?
Oh, you see, off the top of my head, probably. Let's see here. You know, well over $1 million.
Hey, Jonah, I have a question about the gym that we're going to keep. And just a concern for thinking 50 years down the road, because obviously this building will be there for 50 years. If the need does arise to replace this old gym with a newer gym, I just want to make sure that we make that as easy as possible to tie into this new building. Do you foresee any issues with that down the road?
Not necessarily, to be honest. And the reason why I say that is because any connection that you're going to have to make to an existing gymnasium or structure, you have to make another structure right next to it, just by code. And from a fire code standpoint, and from a, you know, if one side falls down because it's a different occupancy, the other one can stay in place. So it would be designed so that you could essentially take that away and not have to depend on the structure of that. And it's not so landlocked in, you know, that makes that impossible. There would have to be some, you know, just like any kind of phased project, thoughtfulness on how that goes about. But that's something that we would want to take into consideration, you know, when that's further designed and developed. And that's something that really happens way into the documentation. But that if that is a guiding principle, you know, if and when the bond passes and this is developed, then that's something that should be taken into account for sure.
And also let's the structural engineers are going to want to seismically isolate the two buildings because they're different designs, different eras. They really can't transfer load from the new building onto an existing building, even though it's been seismically braced. So what we see in these almost all the time is there is a seismic gap of, you know, 4 inches.
4 inches, 6 inches, yeah.
That separate the buildings. So I think you're pretty safe in if you were to come back later and want to replace those gyms. It would be separated by at least 4 inches. Not much, but it certainly doesn't preclude. You're not going to have anything attached to the existing building.
Yeah.
One last question for you, Jonah. Are we going to get the specifics on how many classrooms this accommodates, square footage of maybe each of these modules?
Yeah, we actually have that, and we can reprise that, Kirsten, from our last meeting. We had the program that kind of highlighted all of what went into this plan. So basically, what it boils down to is essentially five classrooms per grade level community with a learning commons, small group room, student restrooms, and small group room, and just those kinds of spaces in there. In addition to that, we have the special needs classrooms. We have classrooms associated with the related arts and CTE. So we have a pretty robust program that we shared last time that I'd be happy to share again, or it should be readily available on that program.
Okay, yeah, I can go reference it on the site.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Another question, Jonah. The maintenance building, is that all brand new construction in a new like metal freestanding building that is spec for that, or is that just kind of a rough idea?
It's just a rough idea at this point, Colin, but that probably makes the most sense, a pre-engineered metal building for that. You know, it's going to be more cost effective, and that function is conducive to that structure type.
And is
So
there any
that's probably one.
Any way to reuse the old building?
You could. I honestly think that the building is in a shape that at times it costs more to rehab a building than it would to you know, save it and keep it. And I think this is one of those times that to extend the useful life of it would probably be, you'd get a diminishing return on your value. Let's put it that way on that.
I had a question, just because I'm thinking library right now. Is there a part of me, when the kids visit me, when school is normal, it's usually at lunchtime. So can you see, and also I know the access now when I see the performing arts and the stage, I know that great parking and accessible. Is there a chance to put that where the media center is related to the arts and CTE? I don't want the kids to be so far away from me, because then I won't get them. But if they're next to the commons and the food, they're more likely to come in and just, if anything, socialize, and then I can interact a little bit more with them. The high school does that. That's where the high school's library is, next to the commons. And just off the top and looking at this, I'd love to be next to the kids as much as possible. And I think that's my best location.
Gotcha. So you're saying kind of somewhere adjacent to the commons over here?
Yeah, almost maybe where the performing arts is. Maybe that's the library, and then the performing arts, although that would be upstairs. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we can certainly take a look at in that proximity, you know, whether or not it's there, you know, because we do want to keep the stage next to the performing arts and kind of keep that. But that can certainly, we could certainly look at something that might make some more sense there.
If you could move the stage and the performing arts, it seems like that would be better flip-flopped, because then that's one thing that gets used in the evenings at the same time as sports and games. So the parking would be, if that was over in the front where the related arts and CTE is, it seems like that would be a good separation.
These over here is what you're saying?
Yeah, if the performing arts and the stage were over there, because then if you have a football game happening and you also have a play happening, it would be a good separation in parking.
Gotcha. And you'd probably, if you did that, you'd want to move the commons as well, if you did that, because you want the stage next to the commons for that seating capacity.
So then that's starting to get kind of complicated.
I mean, that's the rationale, right, wrong, or indifferent, on the common stage performing arts block and food block. These kind of sort of, these sort of, to be honest, these really all want to be related to one another, even that back of house, you know, next to the food, generally speaking.
Jackie, would it be helpful to maybe switch the media center and the special ed, so that then you have the courtyard in between the commons and the media center?
You know, that would be lovely. Special ed is on the ground level, and I think I'm on the second floor. Is that the deal on that?
Yeah, you are currently, but if that should switch, special needs probably wants to be on the ground floor still, but
definitely.
But we can definitely look at an opportunity.
Did you put the media center on top, on the second floor of the special needs?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what if you flipped the commons and the special needs and media center and put the extra CTE and arts, related arts, all on the other side by the stage and the performing arts? You know, put the commons on the outer side and put all of the other things that are arts related and media and special needs on the, I mean, this is an older slide that I'm looking at right now, but the other one that you just had a few minutes ago, it would show, yeah, like, so then you would put the related arts and the media center at the commons, and then move the special over.
Gotcha.
Kind of like flipping your left and your right from those grade levels. Putting your, because I mean, it's been a long time since I was in middle school, but we crossed over our arts activity usually, especially like for stage productions and stuff. A lot of that kind of building would be done in other areas.
Gotcha.
Am I seeing it correctly that right now the media center is 2 stories?
No, that is actually special needs under there. Let's see.
Oh, so special needs goes double the width, and then the media center is just over half of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to weigh in that this is really important work that you will do when you actually do the design. We haven't even touched upon a lot of other nuances to the plan itself. What we're trying to create is a good representation of a basic idea that generally works. Our process, should you pass the bond and really go into a design of the school itself, the final design, we do this kind of interactive pushing around of options and, whoops, sorry, I thought I was pushing around options and what's the relationships of the performing arts to the commons, and all these pieces kind of work together. So this is a very complex building. Our goal here was to show how it could fit in the footprint that is now occupied by the Schlater building. And then it was like, okay, once that piece, it's also trying to show you how you can develop it with an occupied site. We're not proposing the kids move off site. So it's kind of fun in that we, not only do you have a program plan, a program of the spaces and their relationships, plus you have the challenge of you got to fit in a restricted area. So I want to encourage everybody, to know that please, let's get a concept. No, please, let's get a concept, and we can't wait to get everybody back to talk about something in real, because we don't even know if you like these grade level communities. So I think if we can, I mean, this is a great dialogue, and we can make some simple adjustments of the big blocks. That's really valuable, because your colleagues and the other patrons in the community are going to look at it and have similar reactions. So I want to encourage you to look forward to what it can be once we really drill down and take the time. This is not something we can do in a couple hours. This takes, we do multiple iterations with not only community leaders, but teachers, administrators, athletics, every group, every user group. So just want to encourage us to keep the big picture at this point and really work towards making time for the rest of the schools that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Richard. And you're spot on there. That design advisory committee role, post bond is just as intense, if not more, than the long range facility planning, because there's just a lot more detail that goes into it. And like Richard said, there's several meetings dedicated to just moving around pieces and finding what rooms should be next to one another. But getting that overall big picture, does the parking work? Does those locations work? Do we want that front streetage, off of Schlater? Those are, does that athletic separation work? And is that something that we would advocate for? And then, movement of the maintenance building. It's almost, if you get too detailed, pre-bond, all you're doing is you're inviting people to really, everybody has a different way of looking at it. And, you know, we want to try to stay big picture. Do we have the square footage captured? Do we have the proximities captured there? So those are kind of some 2 cents there. So, and we can circle back on this at the end when we get back to our, you know, what did we learn today? If we have some more thoughts that come to mind as we go through and look at the other sites.
Jonah, one last thing that I'd like to put into that conversation, which is if we want to take this piece and have, you know, after we get through the planning and come back to fine tune that for further presentation to the community, let's do that. Right now, like you said, this is big picture stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So as we move on to the other sites, we're going to, like I said earlier, we're just going to look at the K5 and K8 sites today and get some kind of thoughts related to that. One thing I do want to, you know, remind everybody, if they're not aware of this, is just all the really, really great work that the district has done in the last several years in just securing alternative funding via ODE and community, you know, outreach. That there's actually been a lot of money put into these schools within just the last few years. You know, I actually was talking to Steve the other day about it, and there's been about $7 million. You know, I think since 2016 or something like that, Steve, that's been put into these schools. And so I think it's important for us to think about that and to understand that as we look at all of these sites and to kind of come away with an understanding of some of the improvements that have been done already and enhancements there. So all of these will diagram, and again, a very conceptual level, that, you know, so we'll take Butte Creek as a starting point. You know, the seismic upgrades that have been done at Butte Creek and the roofing enhancements as needed, you know, have already, you know, updated almost half the roofing there, which is good, you know, because one thing that you'll see as a common theme through all of these facilities is it really probably makes the most sense to re-roof, you know, anything that hasn't been roofed recently, just because that's your first point of failure. And thinking about that 30-year plan, you know, I think Colin mentioned earlier, you know, how do we make the bond last that 30 years? You know, roofing is one of your biggest impacts that you can have, because that's your first point of failure. So, you know, thinking along those lines at Butte Creek, you know, the thought here is, you know, obviously re-roof all the rest of the facility there. Looking at doing a new gym floor in here as well is one thought there that would make some sense. One of the items that came up in, you know, the facility assessments kind of before we came on board that stuck out in something for consideration that we might want to think about is the replacement of those 1970 classrooms into, you know, more usable space. You know, that's something that did come up. I don't know what we think about that at Butte Creek, if that makes some sense. I think what I might want to preface this conversation with as we go into it is right now these are kind of, we're trying to find some commonalities and finding a big, you know, sort of a big thing to do at each site, if you will, while also doing the deferred maintenance that we need to do at each site to make these buildings last. You know, the seismic improvements that have been done here, I think it was about almost $1.5 million worth of work that's already been done at Butte Creek recently. You know, we had some good positive reviews from the educational adequacy meetings there. So that's kind of some thinking behind that. When we looked at the other category, this is not deferred maintenance. This is not really looking at, you know, exterior enclosure or mechanical systems or any of that. This is really looking at things like, you know, something that doesn't fit within the ODE guidelines. If you recall a few meetings back, Richard gave us a really great synopsis of, you know, other versus what's in the ODE prescription. These are the things that kind of rose to the top from those conversations. And so we wanted to take a crack at, you know, if we were to really look at 15% at each site roughly, what does that look like, you know, and how much of that could you capture in the other category? Now, again, we haven't done the deferred maintenance just yet. So you know, we'll want to really be thoughtful about what we want to look at. But if we were to pull something from this others list, do these items make sense? You know, that demolish the 1972 classroom addition, replace with 2 classrooms and restrooms. Do we want to look at remodeling that kitchen area to provide enclosed freezer, cooler, kitchen office, and ADA restroom? And then also increase accessibility at those existing restrooms there. You know, one idea is these K5, K8s, it's warm, safe, and dry and accessible, right? And safe. There's been a lot of safety improvements that have been done in the last couple of years, but you know, with general funds there. So that's been really good. So that's kind of starting off with Butte Creek. It's a fairly easy one. What do we think about that as an approach?
Hey, Jonah, have you sat down with Lauren and see if this list is matching his list?
Lauren and I are going to meet on that larger deferred maintenance list. He and I have met a few times and gone through these from the big picture idea, and these are kind of looking at the big picture idea. We're going to get into the more fine-tooth deferred maintenance stuff in preparation for the next meeting.
And these numbers are based off of the meeting, I think two meetings ago, where we said 15% of, what was the 15% pertaining to again?
The 15% was looking at the overall needs as identified in the facilities assessment that included the other and the deferred maintenance. So kind of that big a la carte menu. And then
this $2 million number that we have at the bottom, is that close to that 15%, you think?
Yeah, that's roughly what, if you were to hit 15%, that's roughly your target budget is actually right here. Before your budgeted development costs. Does that make sense? Remember those project development costs are that 38%?
Yeah.
So this is really, and that, thanks for that, Josh. I probably should have oriented everybody to that. What we're looking at, target budget, is this 1.2 million. What we see there, if we did look at that and we did take these numbers to heart with an escalation, we added an escalation in there as well. That's about where that would land, and that would be a little over that 15%. You know, it's kind of how that would shake out before development costs. And we'll see a more comprehensive list at the end once we go through all of these to kind of show some of that there.
Sorry, just curious about what kind of timing you put on that escalation, like to 2023 or something like that, or now?
It's put to now, and then ODE factors in escalation for when so it basically, we're picking it up from the 2019 to now when that was done, and then that project development cost picks it up after that, basically. So it's essentially carrying a few years of escalation. And I want to also say too, we'll look at these, you know, once we kind of have an idea of the direction that we want to go, we'll look at those closer and validate some of those numbers, you know, from the square footage standpoint, and then our understanding to create a budget, basically. But they won't be none of this will be a cost estimate. I just got to be very clear about that.
So Jonah, is this in addition to the re-roofing the other areas and the new gym floor that you talked about?
This would be. That's correct, Melissa.
So
it's
then
kind
it
of,
goes
this
over
really kind of,
budget.
it does, over that 15%. Yep. So that's, you're getting to the crux of the conversation. You know, we're kind of seeing how little, you know, that gets us. And so the approach is, do we want to look at all deferred maintenance? Do we want to include a program, you know, element in there, i.e. These two classroom edition, you know, is a perfect example. You know, or are we just doing ADA and deferred maintenance type thing? So, you know, I think that's a good conversation to be had there.
So what's the
Are we
cost
having
of
it now?
what's the cost of the new roof and the things that we talked about, you just talked about, that we have to do or going to do? I guess I can't think about them both without seeing both the numbers.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can jump ahead to that part real quick here. And this is, again, this is that facility assessment number done by BBL there. So this is what I'm talking about, that list. So these are kind of all of those needs here. And then the others are listed down here. So if we want to look at Butte Creek as an example, main building, that's been done. Or wait, no, sorry, that's not.
Hey, Jonah, I am putting in a formal request to have that on our long range, that sheet on our website. If you can get that up, that'd be awesome. Not you.
Is that not up?
That's a lot of value.
Facility assessment?
Yeah.
I don't recall seeing that at all.
No, they combined it. So they took the BB&L and they reformatted it into a more reader-friendly version.
Mm-hmm. So that's about $800,000 is, and again, you know, that $800,000 hasn't been validated from our standpoint just yet. You know, we haven't dove into that, but we're just kind of taking it at face value for these budgeting purposes. For us to validate the entire facility assessment would be not timely or productive, to be honest, at this point, until we start kind of narrowing down what it is that we want to look at.
I have a question. I think it's related to what Melissa said, but looking at that first list that you gave us, and I'll pick on the irrigation of the athletic fields for $400,000. I mean, I would wonder, why is that even on the list, or is this really preliminary? In other words, the first thing I thought of was, well, you had to come up with some projects to get up to the 15% dollar figure, and which I don't think you did that, but to me, that's an example of something that, well, I'm looking for the reasons for these numbers and the priorities. I guess that's really what I think I need.
I think you really need to keep in mind that people are going to be looking for reasons not to support this bond. And a lot of these program things are going to be stuff that they go after. So when we go to the next, when we start getting closer and closer to the end of this, I would really suggest we look at the program costs and the deferred maintenance as separate buckets and see how they fit overall.
Yeah. And that's exactly why it's been separated this way, Wally, is because we wanted to look at the program first, and then we'd look at the deferred maintenance, right, wrong, or indifferent. But we wanted to kind of separate those two. And if the decision was to do all deferred maintenance in lieu of program, then that's something that we could look at. But
just to answer Ray's question though, I just want to make sure you understand that when we did these facilities assessments, we were trying to make it fully comprehensive and to basically, so there's a lot of items that are on this list that are deficiencies when you look at, you know, a lot of schools throughout the state, they have irrigated fields. I mean, there's only so much we can do with those fields without irrigation. So they tend to grow a lot of weeds. But anyway, there's a lot of items, I guess, in here that we included in this facility assessment just to make sure that we had a fully comprehensive list of all of the deficiencies. We knew we weren't going to have enough money to do all this stuff, but I think it is important that it's addressed and on a list. Does that make sense?
It does. I have a question about this deferred maintenance that we keep talking about. The way it's being presented right now, it makes it sound like we don't have the budget right now to maintain our current buildings, and we need a bond to help with deferred maintenance. Am I understanding this wrong?
I think that's very accurate. You know, we're coming up on, honestly, a good majority of our buildings need roofing replaced. There's a lot of money just in roofing as you look throughout the district. And it's going to be more expensive because a lot of these roofs are already, they're single ply roofs that have been put over asbestos containing built up roofs. So you have abatement costs involved in changing the roof out also to do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly where we want to go with the conversation too, is do we agree that roofing needs to happen, right? I mean, and I would suggest yes. And I know Lauren would suggest yes. So then that allows us to kind of fine tune that in and come to our next meeting with all of that, us validating the square footage, you know, the cost per square foot, the abatement that's been identified, so that we can have that more fine tuned there. Does that make some sense? Because I that's going to be a big number, to be honest. The roofing is going to be a big number. It's, you know.
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yeah.
So I was looking at, I believe it was Wally that did the kind of proposal on all of the past bonds. I'm just wondering if this is making anybody else really nervous, because historically we do not pass bonds that are not very, very, very targeted. Every time we've had a bond that has included all of these things, they fail. So I feel like we're just setting ourselves up to fail again. Does that make sense? When you look at all of these things, I mean, I agree that people are going to be looking for reasons not to vote for this instead of reasons to vote for it. And it just kind of seems like we're getting really big, and historically we don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't been able to pass a bond like that. So I'm just curious if that's making anybody else a little nervous that we're setting ourselves up to fail here.
I feel like maybe we need to be looking at tasks that interest the community that they can touch. So things like, I know that the teachers at Butte Creek really want a staff restroom. So that might be a teacher promotion, but maybe not so important to me as a parent. I don't know. I mean, I want my teachers happy. But also covered area, covered play area, obviously a roof, because leaking in our classrooms sucks. And any deferred maintenance that we don't pay for with this bond comes out of the general fund budget. So we want to look at the things that will exist the longest and also be the most accessible to the public who's voting for the bond.
And I agree. Like, I personally would vote to do all of these things. I'm just saying that it's making me feel like we're getting too big, and it's not. I mean, you know what I mean? It just, because trust me, I am a teacher in this district. I think all of these things need to be there. I do
agree, Erin. But what this listed right here, he's talking about possibly remodeling a kitchen area, demolishing 2 old classrooms, and remodeling restrooms for accessibility, and that would be our 15%. It doesn't even
Yeah.
include, I mean, I think we want to look at like 17 things that are smaller cost, unless it all has to just go to roofing, in which case, you know, that's the real world.
I want to step in. I want to step in here and share something with you guys, because it has to do with this deferred maintenance. And if we don't take care of our buildings, they will fall apart. And then, you know, either we keep the building and we put a roof on it, or we don't keep it and we don't put a roof on it. So Silver Falls School District has almost 4,000 kids. We have 13 buildings, 11 to 13. Hood River, 8. They have 4,000. Eagle Point, they have 8 buildings. North Bend has 4,200. They have 5 buildings. Lebanon has 9 buildings, and Canby has 4,700 kids in 8 buildings. We have a lot of buildings to maintain, and I think it's a lot of roofs to repair, and I think it's catching up to us. And that's not to say what to. I think I'm just trying to state a fact that deferred maintenance is going to catch us in the backside, because we're going to have to replace a roof, and then we're not able to build a nicer classroom because we don't have enough money to build a classroom, because we have to build a roof.
Yeah, and if you remember and I could play the other side of that coin, Josh, in group. Eugene Field was essentially left to, you know, not be kept up, if you will. And it's you know, we all know the story of Eugene Field, and we also know the tie that Eugene Field had to failed bond measures. And I'm no expert, as you know, to that specific relationship, but I might suggest that, you know, there may be people in the community that said, you're not even keeping up the buildings that you have. So why would I vote for a bond? So that's, you know, that's kind of a thought, and let's move on to the next school and just kind of look at this. So then we can kind of maybe start seeing a bigger picture, and have that dialogue, and whether or not, you know, whether or not we're even approaching this the right way. But I probably, you know, I know Lauren will say yes to this, and I would agree with him that, you know, I think roofing is, to me, probably a non, you know, it has to be on the list, I would think.
I just want to say the other thing, why roofing is so important, aside from the fact that it keeps water out, is it's a big ticket item. And so keep in mind, the big dollar items are the ones that we really need the bond dollars to pay for. You can chip away at the smaller items in general fund budget a little bit easier than you can $1 million worth of roofing. 35,000 here, 40,000 there, etc. So that's just my opinion, and it's something to keep in mind.
So can I ask real quick?
I would like to ask a question,
Go ahead.
if I may. One question, Lauren Stanley, is it my understanding that our schools, some of our schools have literally an asbestos sandwich going on with the roofing? Is that, and that they're...
That is correct. There's a built-up asbestos roof that is the original roof, and then they put a board layer over the top of that, and then they put a single ply roofing, which was basically a 15-year roof. Most of the stuff on the middle school, for example, is probably 30 years old, and so it makes it a little bit challenging. It's also a real challenge when we do have leaks in the roof. We cannot locate exactly where the water's coming in, because it's coming in the top single ply roof, and then it travels the roof underneath and the insulation until it finds a hole in the bottom asbestos roof, and that's where the water comes out. So
so that water then contains asbestos. The leak is not just leaking, but it could potentially, I would assume it would lead to mold, but also it may contain particles of asbestos.
Okay, so So I want to make it clear though that the asbestos roofing it's a bitumen roofing. It's bonded and encapsulated in an asphalt basically. So
Oh,
it's not
okay,
really
thank
an
you.
exposure issue. However, when it leaks in on ceilings, and to give you an example, we just had an issue at the middle school in room 4. We had this exact situation just happen, and it leaked in on the asbestos ceiling. And so we had to get an abatement contractor over spring break to come in and abate that ceiling so that we could open it up, dry that space out. And we also had a roofing contractor come in and coat that whole section of roofing.
I see, to re-encase it, essentially.
Yes. So what we found is that roof had leaked before. There was actually a patch up in there that they actually went over with another layer. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank
So
you.
we have this similar issue at several schools also, just a heads up. And the biggest thing is it really increases the cost of re-roofing these buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
So Jonah, maybe this was already said, but that spreadsheet, all the things you have listed on there, that's the needs from BB&L that total the $8 million that you had on that slide for Butte Creek the last time?
The one, yeah, that's that total, the last slide that I showed.
You're muted.
Yep.
Oh, you were
I'm muted. What's that? Can you hear me? Yeah, that one large spreadsheet, that's the compiled needs from the BBL assessment.
No, not the spreadsheet. The slide that you had in the last presentation that had each school, it had repair, replace, FCI, and needs. And you had a need for each school. That's the need from BBL, correct? So Butte Creek's needs were $8 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I thought that. I just want to make sure I was thinking right.
Yep. Okay. And I know that all these are going to generate a lot of conversation, and we'll circle back on these. I'm trying to identify patterns as we walk through this, so that we can, I think it'll help us all come to a kind of a consensus and a decision on, how best to proceed. Central Howell, this has been recently re-roofed back here. But again, we'd look for, looking to re-roof these areas. This one's, a little bit of a challenge with its parking in that, you currently have to back out. Well, over here we have a big grove of trees, and you park in between those trees, which, we could look at potentially an opportunity for a one-way if it fits. And it looks like an initial investigation it could, to do kind of parallel parking there if we thought that was a concern there, and to have, safer parking kind of in front of Central Howell. You'll see a commonality with this one and Evergreen, and just that challenge with how tight those are. But that's a potential ticket item, at Central Howell that we could look at. Again, looking at that list, and again, this doesn't include the deferred what I'm calling the deferred maintenance. This just includes those others for accessibility and things like that. What we were looking at was, does it make sense to look at just accessibility for the most part here? So, demo ADA ramp and replace a concrete ramp and handrails, that probably makes some sense. Remodel rear entry that provide ADA access, platform lift and enclosure to provide ADA to the basement. Interior platform lift at gymnasium stage. That one, you can make a case for if we were to go all ADA. You'll see this at all of them. They all have some semblance of remodeling restrooms to provide accessibility, and you get a twofer for that, right? You get upgraded restrooms, and they're more accessible, and you might be able to find opportunities to carve out space and make those larger. replace wood ramp at library. Again, that's a small, like that kind of stuff, you know, that's a perfect item for a you know, a general funds type list, you know, a smaller kind of item there. And then this is that what I've just shared there, that paved gravel parking up front. And this square footage, you know, what I've shared here exceeds that a little bit in that, you know, I don't think Marion County is going to let you just kind of come off of here without, you know, maybe some kind of designated area there. So that's a thought on Central Howell. So you can kind of start seeing some similarities, and you know, roofing, ADA access seem to be rising to the top in this initial study anyway. What else is Central Howell are we aware of, or you know, does that make sense as an approach, you know, at first blush?
That parking along Howell Prairie Road will not be very popular because
the trees.
The pull-in parking gives you a lot more cars in that space, and there's events there that cars are all the way down the field. Gotcha.
So that idea is just a bad idea, Wally, from your perspective?
I think so, because it reduces the amount of parking available.
Gotcha.
The heating system at that site would also be another ticket item.
So do we think that even paving this makes any sense, or do we leave it as is? I mean,
I think you're going to run into problems with the county, just based on my previous discussions about Silvercrest, and I'd be surprised if they'd let you do some of that. I mean, I don't think that I don't know if there's enough room to actually put head-in parking and have room like you're showing in this drawing, but
yeah, it'd be really tight. And if they had you do sidewalk improvements, probably not.
I think we need to actually have the long-term difficult discussion here about investing money into buildings that, you know, how much longer are they going to last? What's our plan with them? You know, paving all of that. You know, we were told that like there was never an idea of combining those three schools, Evergreen, Prattam, and Central Howell. That's not true. I've got the 2012 report here from the last board committee, and they 75% of that committee in 2012 voted for the eventual merger of those three schools. And not only were they talking about merging those three schools, they were even looking for land and how the coding would work as for zoning. So I'm nervous about sinking taxpayers' dollars into buildings that may not eventually be around. Am I the only one, you know, thinking about
let me, if I can comment on that, Josh, too. It's really a good point that you bring up. The thing I think we need to come back to is the several surveys that we've put out to the community at large, especially in our K-8 communities and even our general public, of what they value. And those schools are valued. So I think above all, we have to look at, and maybe moving on from the consolidation discussion to the preservation. These buildings throughout the district are valued. The feedback comes in consistently that they don't want consolidation, that they would like to have these communities that we have out in our K-8 schools continue to exist. Now, if that's what our taxpayers desire, then I think we need to find a way to accommodate that. I think we really need to watch the idea of consolidation. And granted that the former committee may have talked about it, but as you can see, we're 9 years later and we didn't move on it. And I'm not saying it can't be a discussion we have on the table. I think we've had that discussion a few meetings ago, a couple of times. But I think it comes back to, what does our community really desire? And every survey that I've seen, or even, we had Jonah and Richard talk about the communities value their schools. So what is our task, given that fact, what is our task going to be to help improve those schools? I think we really need to keep focusing on that.
And there would be no faster way to sink the bond than to try to do that. Those schools are still, talking about consolidation that happened back, Wally could tell me, early 90s or mid 90s.
1997.
Yep.
I'm going to vote that I don't find in the historical record, there's actually been a question of whether they would like to have a new K-8 school in the rural area. They've only been asked whether they value their schools, which is a very different question.
I mean, Aaron, I want to say I definitely value your opinion. No, my daughter goes to a rural school. I value that rural school. I don't want to see the rural schools go anywhere. All my point is if we can, the difficult task before us is, are we spending this money as wisely as possible, but also respecting people's values and beliefs? I mean, I have patients and friends who go to Central Howell, and they're considering even transferring because they want robotics, they want a science lab, they want more stuff, and they're thinking about transferring from Central Howell so that their kids can have greater opportunities. I know one of the big ticket items for Peter on this committee is a proper kitchens or lunches, and we don't even have these at a lot of these schools or the rooms. So I understand the difficult task that is had, and I want to value those opinions. But like Tom said, I don't know if we've even given them, they've always thought they were going to have to come into town. Did they even know that there would be an option to just give them a whole new facility out there with CTE and labs possibly?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this bond as a whole. We're not, remember, I think we've been redirected a few times saying this is not a 20-year bond. This is a shorter termed bond. So I think when we look at our funding here, we should be looking at what buildings do we want to focus on the structure that will be around for a longer period, and what buildings that may be created a new school down the line, maybe 10 years, then we're not giving them necessarily structure, we're giving them programs, things that they can use for that 10 years. And those kids can utilize that, whereas the buildings that will be around for maybe 20 years, we do the structure, we do the roofing, we do those long-term projects. We still give the money to the smaller schools, and they're just getting it more into the programs, into the covered structure for playground, but they might not be doing the roofing. So again, we're not, this is not the only bond that's going to be passed for the next 20 years. We're going to have to revisit this in 10. And at that point, I think it's a great idea to think about a nice K-8 that utilizes the Evergreen, the Prattam, the Central Howell, because those are the roads, everything around there. I mean, there's nothing that speaks to a safe school next to those roads, at least two of those schools.
I think we're going to have to really put
That's
out
a
good
point,
focus.
Jackie.
I think we'll have to put out really good focused questionnaires to those communities when that time comes. I think that would have to be something we really need to seek out. To Tom's point, even deeper polling out in those communities to see if that's something that's feasible, because my sense is that we might see some resistance on that, knowing what I know from some of those communities, but I think it'd be worth another check-in at that point.
And then Josh, to your point about kids transferring out, there's also a very significant amount of kids transferring in, which is really the great thing about our district, is that we have so many choices.
But we have to remember who votes, who actually pays for this bond. They live in our district. Yeah. They have to, so if they're coming out of our district, they're not voting for this bond. They're not paying for this bond.
I don't think that's what Wally was saying. I think Wally was saying the people in our district that transfer out to our K-8 schools from in town and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I want to be very clear that I'm also one of those people that, my kid transfers to Victor Point. I know a lot of people do the same thing for Evergreen for similar reasons. I also want to be very clear, like, I don't want this issue to get in the way of the middle school bond that's coming up. My plan is that we have to have an idea, a plan in writing what we plan to do with these buildings down the road. This would not be something that would hit the initial bond. That's not because it's not going to be on it, that we're not voting for that. But I'm trying to say, like, what we do put on it has to have some type of thinking of what this committee comes up with, the school board and whoever else is going to have on the next committee, that can have some forward thinking about make sure we're spending our dollars right now as good as we can down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
It's just irresponsible for us to keep saying that we can't have this conversation. We have to have this conversation.
Can I make a comment? The one thing that I sit here and I hear, and it just keeps coming back to me, is that that every school wants to stay there, and that they're willing to do whatever to fight for it. Then if we add up all the needs for all the buildings, it's a $125 million bond. If everybody really wants to do it, then let's go for it and everybody pay for it. That's where I'm having the issue, is we keep saying we want to pay for it, we want to keep them, we want to do it all, but then on the same hand, everybody says, well, we can't afford, we don't want to vote a bond that's above $2 per thousand. I just don't see in my mind how that is all feasibly possible.
Right.
And maybe that's where Steve or somebody can jump in and talk about deferred. And I'm telling you, this is, if we do this for all of these schools, it's a little bit here and there. This is the bond for the next 20 to 30 years. And if it doesn't address everything, we're not going to pass another one in 5 to 10, because they're going to say the same thing like the high school. We just built you a school. You don't need another one. You don't need any more money.
Right.
So if we really fix it and keep all 11 or 13, then let's go all in. 120 million bucks. If everybody wants to pay to keep them all, then they'll vote to get all the money they can for $8 million for Butte Creek. If we don't, 20 years from now, I don't see how we're going to get anything, another bond passed.
I mean, what guarantees that we can't make a plan where we deal with now with outlining what still needs to be cared for? I mean, I feel like if we communicate with the public clearly I mean, we can't foresee every future need right now, you know, so I don't think that passing a bond at this moment is going to mean that we can't pass another bond in 20 or 30 years, especially if in the process of passing, we're working on this, we are just defining to our public that we can't meet those needs, or as the James on the chats mentioned, maybe doing 2 different bond opportunities to the public. One that covers everything, or one that covers a middle school.
Yeah, this is James, and the reason I put that out there is because I really think we have to give the public the opportunity. We're a long range facility planning, not just a short term. The short term need right now is the middle school, no question about it. But I think that if we don't show the realities, which they can vote on, it's up to them to put their money in and us to put our money in if we want to. I'm not saying which way they go. I'm just saying I think it's irresponsible if a long-term committee doesn't look at the long-term needs and say, you know what, we've looked at this. This is everything we've come up with in the term committee. If we're going to be in these buildings for the next 30 years, which everybody apparently wants to do, and I support if they want to do it, then these are the kind of monies we really need to keep the buildings operating at that level. I think that's just a fact and a reality, and I don't think that's this committee making that decision. It's this committee doing the due diligence to figure out what it costs. And then you can have another one that says, hey, look, if we do just the middle school, these buildings will still operate for a while. They will still operate. We can cross the bridge a second time, but it would be, I think just personally, it's irresponsible not to show both, because then you're giving the true reality. Is it a $60 million bond, or is it $125 million? So we can really operate where the community's giving, like Aaron's saying, giving us feedback they want to operate. But there is a cost to that. And I think we just have to show what that cost is.
Right. And I think that I mean, what you're speaking to, James, is that what Melissa was talking about earlier, just kind of that community polling piece, you know, because, you know, we can come up with several different bond scenarios that show, okay, this is what a $120 million bond looks like, you know, $70 million, 60. I don't know if the community will have the appetite for that large of a bond. But I mean, you could certainly demonstrate what it would get you, and talk about it from that perspective. But you know, it always comes down to perception and community appetite and just assessed value. The assessed value, you guys don't have an issue with assessed value, but it's, you know, is the community really going to support, you know, $4 per thousand, or, you know, whatever it ends up being. Our next meeting, we will have kind of those updated numbers for a larger bond, because we're still looking at here that initial kind of 60 million, you know, number that was initially presented. And again, that may not be the right number, but I think point well taken there. And, you know, it was interesting to hear your perspective, Jackie, on, you know, structure versus program, and kind of, you know, that is an approach, and, you know, districts do use that approach, and sometimes to good success. But, you know, I think that's something that, you know, I think would want to get some consensus around on a direction, if that's something that we wanted to look at.
I think it's fiscally responsible for us to do that. If we're down to that term, we need to be conscious of it. And I do agree. I do love the idea of just being very transparent with the community. It's like, if you want this, this is what it takes. If you can stomach it, hey, I'm all for it too. I'd vote for it. I'm a sucker. You know, I'm a sucker for education. That's me. I want to support the kids. My kids are about ready to leave. And so I'm looking at no personal interest for me. I have none in here. There's no one in my home that will be going to school in this community in 4 years. My last one will be out in 3. So I really am looking for the kids and what's best for the kids, and also for our pocketbooks. But we have to be realistic. And I don't know if we can all truly be honest with that.
Is there any way that this committee or we can come to consensus on putting out into, I think coming back to what Tom suggested, to really at this point, seeing that we kind of keep coming back on different ideas, to really put some polls out, especially to our more K-8 schools, to put out some different ideas. Hey, if we're going all in, you know, or even to our greater community, if we're going all in, this is what it's going to cost. You know, to the point of, you know, I think that Tom and Josh were making, you know, what about a consolidation idea? Run that by them. Let's acid test it one more time. Is that something that this committee has the authority or the task to do? I'm not sure.
Great question, Aaron. I also know that a lot of these buildings, they just need more space. I mean, I don't think Victor Point's going anywhere anytime soon. It's a solid building, but they're just short on space. I know they'd like, and they're not even opposed to mods. Like they'd be happy with a double wide mod to give themselves a separate learning space that they could use for band or robotics. I think they just want the options. You know, I think some of us maybe have made decisions for them. If we just ask, like, hey, what do you want? Like, again, in 98, they said they wanted covered play areas. 98, they were asking for them. 2012, covered play areas. We had never got it to them. They had to finance those things themselves, individually. So
really good point, Josh. I mean, let's make sure that we're asking them, all the communities, especially our K-8 communities, asking them what they want, not trying to tell them what they should take, right, or what they need. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify too. Some of the items that we're showing are items that they wanted. Now, again, that's just them. How would I improve my original, you know, my facility now? These are kind of some of those big ticket items, if you will, that we're sharing. So there has been some of that outreach, but it's been very targeted in, you know, how would you improve your current facility? So, and I don't know, you know, as far as I know that there was the survey done before we came on board, the Nielsen survey and study, and I know there was a very, very, very adamant, no to anything that even considers or whiffs of a K-8 closure. It was resounding, and at least, and again, I'm just an outside observer looking at data, but you could do the survey. I'm not sure you'll get a different result, but I mean,
can I say something though, real quick though? That's different. A K-8 closure is different than a consolidation.
Very different. It did not propose that to them at all.
Right. It did not. All he put in that, and we can all agree that survey was the worst thing that kicked off this committee.
Yes.
It started a negative from the beginning that we hadn't even had these conversations. So it did not talk about consolidation. It talked about closing. That's all he had in there. And that's two very different things. And so that's, I think, where we're kind of coming from is if we go to, if this committee, like we said, looks at like what the total cost of all this would be and goes to that PTC and says, hey, over 20 years, this is what it's going to need to keep, like for instance, for Central Howell, I mean, you got the parking issue. What happens if they decide to put a turning lane or a stoplight at Silverton Road? You lose all your parking. If they widen that, what's our backup plan for more parking there? If they do that, then you're going to lose your field, your track, everything. So that's, I think, what
that's where you've got
figuring that out.
Yeah, and that's where you've got to couch the conversation more, in my opinion, and I think we're all kind of doing our opinions too, is putting that out there. Hey, listen, eventually Silverton Road is going to be widened. Okay, so you say that to those communities, and you say, okay, so we know this is going to happen. We've seen it to Staten and so forth, so it's going to happen. So help us, you three communities, come up with a plan. So you've got to really incorporate those three communities. I mean, I've got a wife who teaches in one of them, and I went to Central Howell. I mean, you've got to couch the discussion in such a way that they see what's going to happen, and it is, but have them part of the solution. Does that make sense? I mean, because you go with them and say, you know what, you guys really need to consolidate, you've lost them.
Right.
You just have.
Plus, nobody's proposed a beautiful new facility to them.
They don't care. They really don't. I'm sorry. I said that really short. I'm sorry, April, but they don't care.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I don't know. Somebody might care.
Hey, Jonah, have you actually read the questions on the, oh shoot, now I'm just blocking on the name of the questionnaire that was sent out, the Nelson report?
I have, yep.
Okay, so,
and it's been a while, to be honest, Tom, but I have read them.
Fair enough. It's just very, I think it's really, we keep hearing the Nelson report quoted, and but it's always taken out of the context of what we're talking about, I feel like. So.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. I've read it. Absolutely.
Hey, Jonah, just to give you a time check, it's 8:15.
What's that?
Just to give you a time check, 8:15.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate it. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so I might, let's suggest that we move through these and then let's circle back on this conversation. Just because I think we want to make sure that we've addressed all of them and taken a look at them, whether, they're flawed or indifferent, and see if there's anything that we want to move forward. So Evergreen K-8, again, roofing's been done in the front, so there has been investments done on that facility. And the one thing I know that they would like is the replacement of the small gym that they have over there now, and potentially, moving that closer to the front where it can have some connection to that facility. Overall, again, looking at the others list here, mostly ADA stuff. And I know that this, again, Evergreen fits in those three schools categories, so we can move along and move on to the next school. But that ADA restrooms, below grade waterproofing at the kindergarten wall, that pave of existing gravel parking lot in the front, and then adding room ventilation, which is a small ticket item there. Mark Twain. So, there's recently a covered play that's been installed. An accessible path is something that was desired to have to that covered play. I know that there was additional parking requested at one time. This is challenging just because of that slope. There's that big slope there, so this transition would not be that flat. But here, this is a thought of an idea of increasing that parking either here. You could increase that parking over here as well. I think you'd need to improve that Church Street road to do that, though, because it kind of turns to gravel over here. This, would be a re-roof, potentially here. And again, ADA access for the most part, staff restrooms, student restrooms. We debate that existing roof and replace that. So that they actually captured that abatement in this category here. Pradham, not looking at really program needs there, mostly just, roofing, and then basically any of those deferred maintenance items that we talked about. Once we kind of look at that. Robert Frost, this is one item that I'm interested in hearing feedback on. Is one of the items that was identified, and there was removal of that existing modular building and providing a gym in classroom addition. And I don't know if that's something something that we want to invest in. If you remember I think it's the last bonds, Robert Frost and Mark Twain both had a remodel as part of that bond that failed. And then of course, the acoustical challenges between those classrooms is something that we probably would want to address in replacing those folding partition walls.
Why would they need a gym?
So that's a question, Eliza, I was kind of interested in, is with the new K5s, Jonah, and I'd like Scott to chime in on this, as far as some semblance of one facility being better than the other and whether that's equitable or not. If we, would we get ourselves in trouble if we put Robert Frost and make it an even nicer facility and don't do similar improvements to Mark Twain with creating some semblance of equality between the two facilities?
Right.
I'm just curious if that's going to get us in trouble with the community.
I could tell you kind of why they wanted the gym, just a heads up, because I was privy to that. Currently, the gymnasium, I think the plan would be to try and utilize that as a cafeteria, because they don't have a cafeteria, and currently they're feeding in the mezzanines outside the classrooms, and the kids eat in their classrooms. And so that was one of the issues of why they want an actual gym, is to be able to turn the existing gym into a cafeteria.
Okay, thank you. I just have children who've been in the Y. They've done basketball in both the gyms at Mark Twain and Robert Frost. They seem pretty equitable to each other, but it does make sense that Robert Frost doesn't have a cafeteria. So thank you.
Yeah, and the modular is just really old. That's a bottom line. It's beyond its usable life expectancy.
Could it be, could a middle school modular be pulled in to replace it?
Not in its current location. It would have to be going a different location probably.
You mean the gym and is that what we're saying, Lauren? Or
The modular. I think Eliza was referring to the modular, the existing modular that's there. So it's kind of right on the hillside, and I don't think we could put, with current fire codes, I don't think they would allow us to put it as close to the main building as the existing one is. So typically they require a little bit more fire separation, and that would push us down that hillside, and it would just be a challenging set. So you'd probably have to look on the other side of the building.
Gotcha. For the gym in the classroom.
No,
Is
for a modular.
That dark
Oh,
brown
gotcha.
thing in the image? Is the existing modular the dark brown thing in the image?
That's where it currently is, but I think that's meant to be a gym.
Okay.
Classroom edition. I will say that when we originally talked about it, we were actually looking over on the other side of the building. So it'd be more to the south, but
like over here, Lauren.
Yeah, because that's a hillside right there where you've got it placed. It goes downhill pretty quick.
Right, right. And that's a fairly big ticket item. 2.5 million is what they had in that BBL estimate for 7,000 square feet, basically. But I think, the rationale behind that makes a lot of sense. I mean, is that something that we think we want to pursue on Robert Frost?
I personally need a moment to review these things. I'm going to have to look at them on paper and think about it. I mean, I couldn't tell you what they need. I'm not familiar with Robert Frost.
Mm-hmm.
What's the state of that roof? I mean, it looks like it's getting pretty warm, but it's a metal roof. I mean, is it good to go, Lauren?
Actually, no, we have a lot of leak issues with that roof, and you have some of it that's metal on the pitched areas, but the vast majority of that is a built-up roof it is a single ply roof over a built-up asbestos roof. So, and the problem is they came in and they put that single ply in after the fact, and they peeled the metal up at areas, and there's a lot of issues at the transition. So really, the whole roof on that building needs to be redone.
And is that on the list, Jonah? I didn't even see that one on. No, because that's a deferred maintenance thing. Never mind.
That's the deferred maintenance. Yeah. So that would be all the yellow there.
And how much?
And
how much is that roof, Lauren? Is that $1 million roof?
Oh yeah, I don't have the exact number here, but I could probably pull it up.
No, just best guess, $1 million probably.
Yes.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask a question of the committee. I mean, looking at this much detail can make your head spin. It does mine. I look at this kind of stuff all the time.
Right.
So I wonder if we should, what I'm hearing is if we just have one spreadsheet one simple spreadsheet that shows all the combined detail of all of the improvements, and one with the whatever we want to call it, deferred maintenance, the totals, and then you can kind of look across all schools. We can always go down to the detail. I'm not saying take away the detail. I'm just saying let's consolidate it down into a simpler chart, because it sounds like what we're proposing is here's the wish list and here's the deferred maintenance list. And they either both need to be done or one of them be done. And I think that's a real good place for this committee to start making some of those choices in conjunction with something that was mentioned earlier about reaching out to the out-of-town schools. So I'm in agreement with the committee on that one. Not that my opinion matters, but I think it would help to kind of say, here's the maintenance piece, here's the wish list. Because it might be that you can accommodate both, or it may be that you just need to do the deferred maintenance to get everything warm, safe, and dry. So it's a little more quantifiable or more digestible, not quantifiable. Apologize. Does that make sense to anyone? And I'm not going to be offended. Hey, we're here to help.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Melissa. I apologize.
It's okay. I was just gonna say, yes, that sounds fantastic. I was actually thinking earlier that these meetings over Zoom are so hard because none of us have the papers that we can flip through and look at. And so it would be lovely, I think, if we could have simple, big chart with all the info on it. And if we could, have that available to us before the meeting. When I was on the budget committee years ago, they would email and say, hey, the packet's ready to come pick up before the meeting. And then you go down to the office and you pick up the materials so you could have them at home with you while you're doing this. And I could flip back and forth and mark on things. It's so hard to see what's going on right now.
So Melissa, would that work the same with digital? I mean, could we, if we send it out electronically, and whoever doesn't have access, we could give them printed copies if they
like a big giant colored spreadsheet. I can't print that to make it look like that. So if that could be printed for me ahead of time, but today getting the agenda ahead of time is nice, but even just a heads up, like these are some of the important documents that you might want to have available to look at so that I could print them out or have them in I have a giant folder, but for me to try to figure out what I need when you guys start talking about these spreadsheets is really hard.
Yeah, because you could even give us a list ahead, say you want us to hold on to the BBL paperwork for each school, and then we could have that available so we could see those things. Because like this, I mean, we're also learning that you think the main priorities are roofing and ADA, and you could have even told us that in advance with the packet so we would know what those numbers might look like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you posted it on the website, that would be great. And if we could get all this stuff a week ahead of schedule, because there's often a lot of things to digest here, and we could actually have a very productive conversation.
Okay. Well, do we just want to go around the room then? It sounds like we don't want to look at this right now, and I think we'd rather have time to look and digest it. And we can certainly.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Continue on. I apologize.
Oh no, you go ahead, Richard.
Okay, thanks. I like your idea. Let's get some feedback on what we've heard, and we can commit to turn around the data pretty quickly. And making it available. And I think this would help the committee in trying to see it. So it'll depend upon Lauren helping us out with, we need one list, which is those deferred maintenance items, and the other list, which is what we're showing today. We'll roll them up into single number so that you can kind of look at it, but we'll give you the background.
Hey, Richard, what would really, I think, help me is because what we voted on previously about that 15%, I would like to see what number that would look like at that school. How much money would that be based off that other bond? And then based on what James said, and then when you come back at our next meeting, and hopefully not a month away, because I don't think we're going to get this figured out in one more meeting, but of what a bigger bond would look like and what that could possibly cover. Because if I don't know what that 50%, that number means, I don't know if that means a classroom, if that means a roof, if that means a lab, a gym. So if I can get like 15% means this amount of dollars, it would break it down a lot easier in my head. Because that's what we decided we want. Oh, there it is. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and then we had that a couple meetings ago.
Are those just your 15% totals, or are those based on actual things? That's based on the square footage per student?
This was the target repair cost. That would be the 15% of the total needs at those facilities, except for the middle school, because the middle school, we were just going to replace that outright.
Okay,
So we need to match up what fits into the 15% box.
Yeah.
And then we need to add the deferred maintenance to it, because they sound like they both are needs. I mean, if you,
right,
reflecting on what we heard from the community schools, they want these things. They do care about the roof, but not many people can see the roof. The school district wants to maintain these buildings so that they can continue to serve. And so you have to put the roofs on. So there's kind of two buckets that to really address the needs of these community schools, even for the short term. So we'll give you that information such that you can discern which one you want to include or exclude or slice and dice.
Okay.
No, comment, please. I know this might not be a good idea, might not be simple to do. And I know that I assume it's an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. You're taking dollars per square foot times square feet and then times a percent, and you're coming up with a number that shows 18. Don't move it yet. So here's the second one down is $84,000 and $84,915. Now, could it be 914 or 916? The point I'm trying to make is if you could round those numbers to the nearest 100, that would make it so much easier when you're scrolling down the list and looking and comparing. And you don't have to look at so many numbers. Now, that might be a lot to ask to format your spreadsheet, and it might mess you up somewhere down the road. But that would be helpful in some cases. For me, if this is all in Excel, that would be a good way to make it available rather than going to the website and trying to download it and do all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and we could do that, Ray. We could hide these columns, kind of here, and then just keep those columns. I will say, if you want to look at Excel, there's 35 different files that are it's pretty volume. It's a lot to digest and go through. So, and basically those wrap up into this overall spreadsheet here, which is probably, it's detailed, but it's not, you don't really get a sense for it, unless you look at that detail per, at each site. Understood it gets complicated with just all the numbers here, but we could hide those columns and kind of leave the extended here. The accepted is just, if we want to accept that, and if so, how much percentage of that. Candidly, I knew this was going to be the bigger task. That's why I wanted to get the middle school, kind of wrapped up and put a bow around that. And so I'm glad that we're getting into this level of detail now. But it's a lot of detail, and I totally empathize with everybody here because I've been living it for a while.
On this slide that you're looking at right here, the things that say 100%, all of those approximately total 15% of the total value. I mean, I don't understand how you've even come across your decision making other than that maybe it's ADA or roofing related.
Exactly.
And it's approximately 15% of the total.
ADA or roofing were kind of things that we were looking at, or some program improvements. And so that 100% is basically saying, and this is, again, quite candidly, this is why this is, distributing, to Ray's point, we need to find some way to make it more concise, because it's just a lot of information that, even for somebody that's living and breathing it and digesting it all the time, it's just a lot. And so basically that 100%, Eliza, that was saying, out of that need associated with that school, you know, we're saying we're going to take 100% of that. So we're going to take care of that particular item, and that's what the cost would end up being. Now, if you said,
and then the reason that you would choose that item is because, I mean, is there any reason that you have highlighted an item other than that it meets approximately the total or ADA or roof? I mean, I don't, like, you're talking about stairs and ramps and lift access for the basement. So those are your priorities, right?
That's just saying, you know, ADA. If we wanted to say ADA improvements everywhere, then that's taking this list and looking at what are the identified ADA needs, and then what would that value be based on the BBL estimate.
Okay, so this doesn't include like Lauren's wish list or the school's top 3 or something like that. This is just according to ADA.
It does. We went through. So, you know, wish list is roofing, ADA access, are those wish list items. Anything you see in orange is the wish list from the school itself. The parking improvements are from the school, the schools themselves, you know, in talking with them. We know that parking is a concern at Victor Point. And they want parking there. They want more parking, as an example. Scotts Mills, they want more parking, as an example. You know, they also want a covered play, you know, so that's what that would look like there. But they also, you know, in talking with Lauren, you know, the biggest challenge they have at Scotts Mills is, you know, all those buildings are separated. And so, and then the heating and HVAC is all a challenge. So does it make sense to look at, you know, a consolidation of those buildings and making that more of one building? You know, that's an option, you know, that we were going to kind of look at with you and see. I was just trying to get, you know, general reactions, to be honest, and feedback on kind of this approach. So I guess I should clarify. These are requests made by the school and Lauren. We have not captured the cost of the deferred maintenance and have not gone through that list just yet, because we wanted to look at program first. Does that make sense?
And they're layered on top of needs that were originally defined by BBL.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
I think we just got a little too detailed before I understood the macro, and I apologize for taking us backwards.
Oh yeah, no apologies needed. That's yeah, it's a lot of detail, and these finding out what is the right solution for these K5, K8s, coupled with the challenge of you know, what schools, you know, do we want to put structure to, and what do we want program to, and all of that. I'm kind of hearing, and I guess if we produce this information and send it out, you guys will be all very well prepared at the next meeting to provide really good input and feedback and thoughts and you know, suggestions and things like that.
I really like seeing the pictures, Jonah. I think they're great. I mean, I really like that idea about Scotts Mills, but I guess it really comes down to dollars. I mean, can we afford it? You know?
Yeah, and that's going to be a big challenge. If anything, I was really trying to whet everybody's appetite for the next meeting, which is okay, the prioritization, because that list is going to be big, you know, the dollar amount, and so we're going to, as a group, have to prioritize and gain consensus on that. That's a charge of this committee. And so Silvercrest, and again, I won't go into a lot of the detail, but we already talked about Scotts Mills. We already talked about, okay. Silvercrest, one of the wants, desires, needs at that facility is the replacement. I don't know how many people have been out at Silvercrest, but this building is where the red outline is in pretty bad shape. And so they would like a library coupled with the music room, and there's a computer classroom there currently, and then a covered play. So could you look at an opportunity to consolidate that as one structure type thing? Or could you look at, is that place the right place? Does it make more sense to be connected to the gymnasium over here, and kind of have more of a central area with covered play out here and leaving this more open?
Jonah, because we're talking about this, are you saying this is an option that's possible under that 15% rule?
I'm saying that this is something that we need to put a dollar figure to, if that's something we want to pursue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question on that, and I think everybody knows that. So I've been thinking over this with the whole the structure that you just moved, because Lauren has talked about it, how it's going to have to be replaced. It just is. When we look at these budgeting items, and I may be totally off base, and you can tell me this, but can't we look at something like a prefab building, something like maybe from a Dare or Blazer Industries, to help with some of this cost? I can't help but go there, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You could look at alternative construction methods for getting something that's more cost effective. And sometimes you do pencil out. A lot of times in these more intricate programs, you don't, because you've got to have all of this stuff that goes in there, the casework and the, all the insulation, whereas a pre-engineered metal building, it's insulated, but it's not insulated to the degree that you'd want a classroom, as an example, to be insulated. Modular buildings, you don't save money on modular buildings. That's kind of, when somebody tells you that if you do modular construction, you save dollars, you potentially save schedule, because you can be building that in a factory while you're building the foundation on site. But every time we've done a modular building, it's just as expensive as doing a regular stick build. So you could do pole barns, but that's something that you would reserve for like maybe a maintenance building kind of thing, or like how they've done over at Victor Point. They have a pre-engineered metal building over here, which works great for that function. So being selective and kind of where you put those building systems,
Sure.
I think is really vital.
They're great.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jonah, and that may be too much detail anyway, but it's just something where my brain just went to.
No, it's a legitimate. Actually, we're in the middle of doing a project for Hillsborough School District, where they started out with a Blazer modular construction, and it turned out to be $350 a square foot, and they're now stick building it with a general contractor at closer to $250. So if you just like the Victor Point, the perfect example. It's a big building gymnasium, perfect. That comes right out of the box. They put it up, they erect it, they're good to go. But you can't, the yellow that we have shown on this plan are those walkways and the covered access connectors that they really had in their plan that they couldn't afford, because that is custom construction. What they got was the nice big building that replaced what I think was an old bus barn. And so it's actually very, at was it Silvercrest that was that is a garage, a bus barn, and that building is
correct
listing, and that's why it was on the list of it really could be replaced. Now, could it be replaced with a metal building? Yeah, but it has library, music, and a computer lab. That's where you can start getting into a little bit more costs associated with outfitting it and creating the kind of space you want. So
yeah,
legitimate question, Sean.
How much issue
Yeah.
is there?
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Thank
How much issue is there connecting to the old structures with seismic air differences and the asbestos and fire, et cetera?
It really depends, Tom. It's kind of a case-by-case basis. You know, however structurally sound the other building is and how much it sways will determine how big the seismic gap has to be between the buildings. But you're always going to build a separate structure next to that structure, and that's always going to be a firewall for the most part. So you always want to take that into consideration. But you know, we wouldn't suggest tying into the building. The area where we may try to do something like that, if that was something we really wanted to pursue, was like Scott's Mills, you know, with the overframe kind of, you know, construction there. Now, we'd have to have a structural engineer tell us how valid that could be, but that approach. But we do it all the time, I guess, is a quick way of answering that question, Tom. People always think that you should, you know, have a building separated, and you know, sometimes that makes sense, but you know, looking at educational planning and design and safety and security, you try to minimize your entries and exits as much as possible. So we always try to connect buildings whenever we can. So those are kind of just some, again, Victor Point, that was, you know, the parking, that's a desire from that school, and a need. So these are just some opportunities for that parking, you know, while still keeping the backstop over here. But we could potentially put parking over here as well. So those are kind of some opportunities. I know that's something that always comes up at Victor Point is parking. Though this one's been completely re-roofed. So this is a good example of where you potentially could, you know, say, you know, we're doing less than 15%, you know, and adding that elsewhere. Except you got to re-roof that tiny little roof that for some reason they never roofed there.
Yeah, that's the kitchen. It's important.
Yeah. So this is, you know, again, just in quick summary here, those what you've seen, you know, minus a couple of those late breaking changes, i.e. That computer library, I didn't capture that one in here, but this is kind of where that shakes out. If you took those ADA, this is minus the roofing, so you know, we'd have to add that on top of this. But this again, this is just demonstrating the challenge that we're faced with when it comes to, you know, parsing it out and looking at improvements at each site. You know, we're, you know, just for those minor improvements we saw, we're you know, already over that budget there. Again, that budget that was done a little while ago there.
Where it says target repair cost, that is 15% of the total repair cost?
Yeah, the identified repair costs from that VBL estimate. That's the target. So when we say percent repair, that's the target for that. So that target repair cost, this 15%, this 1.9 million is 15% of the overall.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then the accepted cost is, you know, what we were looking at for those other ones. And again, you can see here, this doesn't include anything for the high school just yet.
Can I just ask? We'll have the video. There's so many. These slides are actually really good. And is it possible to just post all the slides on the website so that we can thumb through them?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I did notice that it looks like there is a presentation, at least for the last meeting, listed on the long range facility planning page. So the slides are there for that meeting. I haven't reviewed all the rest. and certainly not this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get those up, Tom. Debbie has a copy of it, so we can get those updated. Because I think, you know, honestly, and we weren't even looking for consensus today because we knew that there was just going to be a lot of information to digest. It was a lot for us to produce, and a lot for us to take in and review. And we feel like we haven't even scratched the surface, to be honest, on the exact right approach of this. So I appreciate everybody's patience. I know this has been I knew it would be a challenging meeting, but I'm hoping that you know, with that we can, and with the slides, you guys can kind of digest and take a look and see what you, you know, see what your thoughts are.
Hey, John,
I'd like
real quick. Oh, I got to jump in here real quick. I'm looking at all these buildings, and I just watched one of the last board meetings, and I think there's another building that we're leasing all of a sudden. Now, we're not going to have anything to do with any maintenance on that because we didn't buy it, correct? We're just looking at buildings we own, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what we're looking at. Yep. So we're not looking at, yeah. This is just a real quick reminder, and it's funny, you guys are kind of in sync with this because we talked about it at the beginning of the meeting. This is the really great work that Wally did early on. I think it was maybe our 4th or 5th meeting. And just, again, a real quick reminder of some past bonds and what passed, what failed, what was in those bonds as a way of, between this meeting and the next, to really kind of think about that as we finalize and really strategically think about the K5, K8s and what we want to do there. Again, going back to 2014 was your last bond, and that failed, and with you know 1,090 votes by 1,090 votes, so 43%. That was a renovation of Robert Frost, Mark Twain, and then of course replacement of the Schlater decommissioned building with that new middle school in between there, with security and tech upgrades. Before that was configure Schlater campus to serve grades 5 through 8, district-wide construction maintenance, configure, this is funny, Robert Frost and Mark Twain as K4 schools. And then, you know, your two successful ones, you know, and we keep talking about the concern about the 20-year, and rightfully so. The 94 and then 2006, you know, so you think about that, you know, that's a little over 25 years since that first one, which I just look at this and I'm like, holy smokes, a new middle school $15 million, that's amazing. But it makes me long for old construction costs.
Can I comment real quick on that, Jonah?
Yeah.
They put all of the actual wording of those bonds on the website. If anybody wants to go read through those, that describes exactly what was in them. And I think one of the real shocking things to me when I read it is I had heard for years about the community being lied to. And when you look at the 1994 bond and you look at the work that was done in the committee before the 1994 bond, the consultants told them, you need to do this in phases. This has to be done in phases. You don't have the bonding capacity to build one high school. It has to be done in phases. When you look at what was in the voters pamphlet, it said a bond to pass or to build a new high school. And voters voted for it. And then later on found out that there was going to be a second phase. So I don't know if it was an accident, if it was strategic, but it hosed us. Because if you look at the amount of money that we ended up having to spend to get the second phase done because of one omission of the word phases. And so that's one of the things when we talk about how we're going to do this, it has to be iron proof. I mean, it has to be perfect.
Likewise, the messaging that I recall from this last bond in 2014, it didn't include any of this bringing these buildings into condition. At least the way it was messaged to the community was as Save Eugene Field. And I don't see Eugene Field listed anywhere in what that says it's to do. It says it's to renovate Robert Frost and Mark Twain and make upgrades to the Schlater building. So messaging is important.
Absolutely.
I would point out, oh, excuse, okay, am I on? I would point out the first three on the list. The group of voters is different than all of the voters in the Union High School phase, whatever, because the 69, 84, 1990 were Silverton Elementary School District, so it was only the voters in town, basically, that voted on those bonds. The Union High, of course, is everybody.
And I had a question. Maybe Ray can answer on that. Does that mean that there was never bonds for Butte Creek, Evergreen, Prattam, or Central Howell? Did they never pass any kind of bonds back then, if they were their own district?
Well, before unification, Evergreen, if you want to pick on one, had their own board. And so, yes, if they were to have passed a bond, it would have been totally theirs.
Yeah. So is there any history or past records of those bonds?
I don't know.
So that's a really good point. So from my understanding, prior to 97, when we were trying to pass this bond in 94, I mean, essentially it was only the in-town people that were going to have to pay for that because the outside districts didn't have to. And reason to unify outside of equity-based education, because everybody had different curriculums and it was very difficult to get everybody on the same page, was to basically double our bonding capacity. By bringing all those communities in, it allowed to, because they were all using the same high school. And I think there was a level of maybe unfairness, like, hey, only the in-town people are paying for the high school when everybody's using it. I don't know if that's how it was, or if I'm just speaking out my
No, that's not true. Everybody was part of the Union High district at that time, and we paid for the high school.
Right. Okay. Got a bigger capacity when we unionized, we got a bigger bonding capacity to be able to pay for more.
And when we consolidated, there was a request by Victor Point School District that the Silverton School District would take over their bond.
I vaguely remember that, but it ended up that Victor Point had the Victor Point community, previous district had to pay off their bond after unification. It wasn't spread across the district.
So when we did the 94 bond, the bonding capacity was based off of 1,200 students, roughly, Wally. Like that's what the high school was, 12 or 13, or maybe it was 1,100 students.
The bonding capacity of the district was $15 million in 94, which for the high school, and that was all they got.
Correct.
Much 100% of their bonding capacity.
It didn't have to do anything to do with the enrollment.
No, it had to do with the tax base.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe, if I'm correct, when I think what Wally said is true. If the elementary district had an existing bond, and when unification came along, those taxpayers in that local district had to continue to pay that bond without any help from the unified district.
Yep.
So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we're a minute over now, 9 o'clock. And I know there's a lot of questions and we didn't come to a resolution on and I didn't intend to tonight because I was really wanting to hear everybody's feedback at the end and kind of some just key takeaways. And I know there's a lot to digest and there's just a lot of detail. But I'm just hoping to have the next meeting on April 21st, 3 weeks from now. Does that work for everybody?
Well, Jonah, are we going to be able in the last meeting to actually come up with what we feel like is an adequate plan to present to the school district in one more meeting? Because that's our last one, right?
No, we have two after.
Two more, but
This
that
one.
okay.
Yeah. And what you'll see is as you go through that information and all that data, is, you know, that target amount, that 15%, you know, we have to be very targeted. That's why we were showing kind of, you know, ADA and roofing upgrades and some select program and site circulation type items. Now, if that's not the right approach and we want to look at something else, we certainly need to. Lauren and I will work on, you know, between now and then to get all the deferred maintenance and make that a more concise kind of list that's more consolidated. And I'll probably just end up hiding a lot of detail, to be honest. I always err on the side of providing too much detail, you know, because if you don't provide too much detail, then it's always kind of like, well, what'd you miss? So it invites you to take a look at everything. You know, if you have to leave, that's okay. But I would like to, for those of you that would like to stay and just, you know, give kind of your thoughts and feedback, I really appreciate it, so we can prepare for the next meeting. So I'll go around the room again real quick here. And I'll start with Melissa.
So we're doing like our thoughts for the summary of the meeting. Is that what we're doing? Okay.
Yeah, summary of the meeting or next steps. And, you know, I know you want to see survey, you know, or would like to see that.
Yes, I think a survey is very important. And I think that the language of the survey is going to be key. And so maybe there should be like a subcommittee that works on that, how we go about explaining things so that people don't get scared, and that there's options and that this isn't set in stone and we're thinking about things. It's not going to happen next week. So I think a survey would be fantastic. I also think that Jackie hit the nail on the head, and Jackie for the win. I absolutely love the idea of doing, you know, structural things with the buildings that we know are going to be around, and maybe doing more program things for some of the other schools. Just because, like, I heard from a parent today saying that they absolutely would not vote for any bond for the middle school if it included money for schools that they think are not going to be around in 20 years, because they think that's just throwing their money away. And one of the tenets of this group was that we are going to be fiscally responsible with our taxpayers' dollars, and throwing money away without having this plan for 20, 30 years, I think is not doing that.
Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Ray.
Based upon some of the discussion tonight, thinking about it, of course, it's nice that we are only recommending to the board. Therefore, it seems to me that we should not be afraid to make more than one record, let's put it this way, we should not be afraid to give the board some choices. Well, I guess we can prioritize them if we so choose. And so it seems to me as difficult as it might be, that we need to include our choices, to include those that we really believe in the long term are the correct ones, and ones that we're not going to come to regret. And so I guess where I'm going is, if we believe that a combination of, well, the words tonight were Prattam, Central Howell, and Evergreen is a better choice. And of course, we have to have some dollar figures to go with that. that should be one of the choices we present to the board. And they will then have the tough decision to make as to whether or not that's a possibility financially.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Lauren.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thank you to all the committee members. And I just want to tell you all, I just feel so fortunate to work with such amazing people and to be, be able to serve this community because of the great people like you, your dedication to the schools and trying to help us figure out what we need to do to maintain them and what direction to go. But I just, like I said, you're all amazing, and all of your viewpoints. I'm just so impressed. This is the fourth time I've been through this process, yeah, you're just doing an amazing job. So thank you all.
Thanks, Lauren. Eliza.
I don't think I have feedback tonight, but thank you.
Great. Thanks, Eliza. Sean.
Well, I am really glad that we all are coming from different perspectives and backgrounds and are able to have these discussions, quite frankly. And I think we all have opinions. That's why we are here. But I also feel that we're listening to each other. And I think we are kind of boiling some things down to some good plans and directions that we can head. So that's my comments.
Thanks, Sean. Brett.
I think with this group, kind of going off what Lauren said, I think getting people materials early, because this group likes to dive. I mean, people want to dive in, people want to work hard and come up with the best decision. So however soon we can get people stuff so they can go through it, I think our discussions will be really good. And this might just be Zoom fatigue or Google meeting fatigue, but I was just going to throw out, if there's any way that we could meet in person somewhere, I would be all for that if other people are. And if not, that's fine. But I would love to I just remember our first couple meetings in person, not the first meeting, but the ones after, were a lot of fun. And I felt like we had really, really good discussions.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brett. Josh.
Yeah, I just, I've been thinking about this a lot, and just what a great team I think that is here. All the variety of different opinions, and I cherish it. I really love it, and I think we're so diverse as a group that I think we can figure this out. I really think we can, and I think we can come up with a plan that we really like. I'm a little bit kind of like taken aback by how much money we need for all the maintenance stuff. I think that kind of caught me off guard tonight. We can try to give the school some things they want, but we also need to give them things they need so they can stay open. And that surprised me how expensive that was. So, but again, I really appreciate all the work that you and Richard are doing, Jonah, and the school district, and a crazy year. I mean, it's just really nice to see the great team.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Josh. Thank you. Jackie.
I love the idea of a survey and getting that started and out. Suggestion, because I don't know how the survey was collected last, is just surveying parents of kids in schools is not our voter base. We have a lot more community members involved in that voting. Are surveys available? Can surveys be sent out with, like, say, a water bill? I know people are on wells, but most people get a water bill. And so if some sort of survey or questionnaire or something can be submitted along with a water bill, we could get more community information back. I'm just not, I know everybody opens their water bill. Everyone pays their water bill and they see it. Not everyone reads the newspaper. Not everyone goes on Facebook. Not everyone has kids, but it seems like a water bill services a lot of people, except for the ones on well. And then, of course, we would survey and try to get them other ways. But I think somehow getting that survey out to a lot of people would be helpful.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, Jackie. And I think, you know, I'm not sure how one thing I don't know about the Nelson survey is how it was distributed. And, you know, a lot of times what districts do is they do the survey kind of in the bond planning portion. So after it's kind of like, but yeah, when you start, like, so it made me think about Ray's suggestion about, you know, is there a tiered approach that could be presented, you know, kind of as multiple options, and that could be an opportunity to do something like that, you know, kind of what would you support, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's something that we'll talk to the district about and how best to proceed with that. Lisa, James, I'll go to James. Oh wait, she's there. Hey, Lisa.
You ready for me to talk?
Yeah.
I agree with Brett. I've been wondering for a while if it'd be more productive to meet in person, at least for those who are comfortable doing that. I wonder if we could get more accomplished and have the papers in front of us. Also, I live in the community area that everybody's discussing. I work in the community. My kids go to Victor Point. I work at Victor Point. I think one of the biggest things is we want our kids to stay in the country, K through 8. We want our kids in a country school. Now, whether or not that means same buildings we're in now, or would people be open to consolidating? I don't know. And I think it's a good survey to put out there. I guess what would these 3 schools get? What kind of building, what kind of options are they gonna get? Where is this gonna be? How big is this gonna be? I guess me as a parent, I would be open to that, but I don't know, I can't speak for everybody. I would rather my kids stay in the country, but I wouldn't be opposed to having a new facility. Now, I think Victor Point is still in good shape. Just my thoughts.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Lisa. James.
Not too many comments other than just to say, I think what unites us as a school district is much bigger than what divides us. And I think if we tapped into that passion along that the commonality is we want a good education for our kids, whether it's town or country or wherever we are, if we put those options out and make the choices real to the community and the school board, because really they're the deciding factor, I think you can get something passed. I mean, I think really at the end of the day, there's not many of us in the outlying communities. I'm out there too. We know there's a reality of a middle school. It's needed. I don't want kids in any area to have a bad education. And I think the town kids if you look at it that way, shouldn't want the outlying kids to have an education they don't desire. And I think if we work with that, we can get something passed. It's just all our messaging. Keep it on what unites us, not what divides us.
Great. I think that's a great message, James. Brandon.
Kind of going off the last two. Instead of, it seems like we just assume that something won't pass because it hasn't before, or surveys have been bad. But I live in town, went to in-town schools, and I think that the country schools are pretty vital to what make this community special. And when we talk about consolidation, I think people see it as the in-town not kind of respecting the communities out there. But if we pitch it as our own way of preserving those outer communities, because in the future, we don't want to see them be forced to go by the wayside. And yeah, if you offer shop and ag courses, robotics, stuff like that, I think, yeah, just messaging. So.
Great.
And keeping our promises.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great, thanks, Brandon. Peter.
Yeah, I thought the conversation was really good, and really for the first time felt that this was moving long range. I mean, we went from kind of the tactical focusing at the middle school, and then more strategic. So just some comments. I liked what Jackie said, and really kind of made me thinking the phase 1 and phase 2 might actually be a little more of an option, along with some other folks' comments, because if we really state it in phase 1, this is really the middle school to fix the structures that we know are going to be here a long time and program, but there's going to be another one. It's going to come, and that's kind of the next step. What is that plan? And looking at the 3 schools we started discussions about, Central Howell it's not going to be there forever for certain, because I know that highway is not going to bend around it. So Silverton Road is going to get a signal there at some point in the next 50 years. And when that happens, and the turn lane expansion and whatever other right-of-ways and easements, the gas station can move, the school really can't. And so all those schools in that area might have some impact. So those are the long-range kind of concerns that I think we need to enter into that phase 2. But I really enjoyed the conversation because we started talking about some of those ideas. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Tom.
I really like that it feels like we're kind of reaching out across the district and kind of maybe exploring what the district as a whole wants. I feel like that's been, we've just been really focused on the middle school, which doesn't really affect generally the whole district. And I feel like having this conversation encompassing the entire district is going to probably create a different atmosphere and maybe just improve our whole school district. I don't know, this feels energized and great to me.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Aaron.
Yeah, I want to echo what everybody else is saying. I thought we had really good discussions tonight. Even with differing opinions and differing, strategies and even potential disagreements, I think out of those kind of conversations come great plans. And I think that we're going to get there. I have faith that we will continue to pursue all options that just, will allow us to get to where we need to be. I think that's going to take a lot of listening, as we talked about, maybe some potential, more polls or surveys going out to our communities across the district about potential plans before this moves any forward. Maybe that's something that would be good for us to do as listeners. I also am thinking that, I know we have the goal of May going to the board, but is that going to be, are we going to have an adequate enough plan developed by May to go to the board with something comprehensive? Is this something that we need to, no one likes to stretch things out any farther than they need to, but do we need more meetings beyond, April or into May? I don't know, but I think that's something that might need to be considered, thought about, just so we make sure we have a very solid, united plan that we go to the board with. So that's something I at least wanted to throw out there, say maybe we need to take a few more months to try to chew on this some more. So thanks a lot, John.
Thanks, Aaron. Colin.
One thing that kind of went through my mind and has been kind of going through my mind is we keep talking about deferred maintenance, and that basically, the way I understand that, is maintenance that we can't afford to do, right? So we're deferring it off. Is that my understanding that correctly? And so with that being said, it was said earlier that, we didn't take care of Eugene Field. We didn't take care of Eugene Field. And so I'd like to know from like the district perspective, Steve's perspective, back in the day, did we not take care of it, or did we not have the money to take care of it? And And so when we keep hearing about deferred and we've got these large deferred costs on all these buildings, if we don't have the money to pay for it to fix all this, then where's the money going, and where are we misspending the money, or where do we not have the money? Do we just not have it? And I think that's something we need to kind of talk about is if our deferred costs are so high, where's the money going to come from to do that? And is it going to be in the budget over the next 20 to 30 years to fix all the other things that the bond's not going to cover?
Steve left, Colin.
Hey, Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, Colin, just since Steve left, I can tell you that Silver Falls School District is not unique in the state of Oregon with your amount of deferred maintenance. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's why part of, the small school districts, they can take $4 million and double it. And you know what they're doing with it is they're doing the deferred maintenance. They're replacing mechanical systems, nothing really exciting, but they're thrilled to get past a $4 million bond, get 4 to match, and they're replacing mechanical units in all their schools. So there's just the change in the tax structure years ago, how we taxed, took everything to a central, consolidation of the school system, kind of changed all of that. So some of it's followed back to 20 years ago, 20 plus years.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. Wally.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to compliment you, Joan. This is a tough thing to do, to try to chair a group like this, and especially over Zoom makes it even harder. So my only comment is when we talk about these big numbers, it really need to boil it back to the taxpayer and understand what the impact is for that taxpayer, because that's where the rubber is going to hit the road. And unfortunately, in the Silver Falls district, we've got a problem with our tax base. It's almost all residential, and it's pretty difficult.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Wally. Aaron. Scott.
The one thing that I would say is I was actually going to say the same thing that Brett said. It'd sure be nice to stop doing this on Zoom and possibly in person.
Yeah.
I've been on lots of Zoom calls this year, so I'm a little over it. And I'm just really worried about all of these things that are needing money, and like, what's the backup plan if we can't get a bond passed? Are we just going to keep going until we do pass one, or just makes me nervous. In my heart, I want to pass. I want the big one. I want the one that's going to pass, or that's going to pay for everything. But like, what's our backup plan? That I think is why I'm concerned about making sure that we have this is what our plan is for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years, for the 20, just trying to come up with what are we going to do? Because we are a very unique district, and with that comes some pretty unique challenges, as well as all the positives.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Aaron. Lori.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Yes. Oh, good. Okay. I'm on. Yes, I would agree that we do, I think, to Melissa's point, need another survey. History is critical in understanding bonds and long-range facilities, but also the present understanding of where our community is at is also very critical to this process. And I think that would be a wonderful idea. And I would agree to Ray's point when he talked about breaking things into phases and presenting that to the board. One plan can have many ideas. It doesn't just have to be a plan. It can have many facets, many tiers to it. I think that's a very positive thing that was mentioned. Also, as much as I I am glad to hear that we can have conversations that can be at times difficult. But the positive thing is we're communicating and we're talking. And as long as we listen to each other and consider what we're stating, that helps us all to be more in a forward mode as a static mode. So I was hearing and seeing many things that were positive. I would agree to a survey. I would also like to meet in person. I'm vaxxed, I guess, as they say. And I also have been reading some of the comments, and one of them stated that what other school districts do you know that have a similar profile to ours as far as
There aren't any. There aren't any.
I don't know.
It's
But
pretty
that would
unique.
be pretty okay. So anyway, I'd like to know the answer to that question, but I believe that's in the chat box. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And I'll wrap it up with Scott. Did you want to add anything?
Well, I would just say that, I agree with a lot of the comments around the discourse that's happened tonight. It's such a great learning for me to sit back and observe that. I think that, I keep hearing the word survey, wanting to get more information about how our folks feel about some of the issues. I would just really encourage us that we're focusing on getting a representation of the voices from those specific communities that we want to elicit information from, and get away more from the we know what you want to actually what do you want, and in that sort of messaging that we approach it from that standpoint. And so anyway, I know it's late. Thank you all for being here.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And thanks to everybody that stuck around. I know we went half an hour over our time. This is really important work that everybody's doing, and we'll see you all in 3 weeks.
Thanks a lot, Jonah.